Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Sposito. Kathy Sposito is a young girl who has always been close to her parents. Kathy's parents divorced while she was still in school, but despite this separation, she remained close to both her mother and father. Kathy, after completing her schooling, intended to further her education and build a career in the field of environmental security. She had a deep concern for environmental issues and aspired to contribute towards the betterment of humanity. To finance her goals, she took up a job to save money for her relocation. With high ambitions, she set out to find a more suitable place to live. In early 1987, Kathy moved from Brooklyn to Prescott, Arizona, USA. The region was renowned for its scenic beauty, untamed natural landscapes, and opportunities for those seeking to fulfill their dreams. At the time, Kathy was 23 years old. In Prescott, Kathy planned to earn a degree in environmental protection while working as a waitress at a local restaurant to support herself. Kathy was determined to be financially independent and not rely on her parents for money. She rented an apartment, paid her own tuition, and prided herself on being self-sufficient. She was described as a kind, caring, and understanding person. Kathy's life was just beginning, and a bright future lay ahead of her. Tragically, her life came to an abrupt end. After moving to Prescott, Kathy decided to take a walk around the local attractions on the morning of June 13, 1987. She chose a trail located on Prescott National Forest Trail 33, which is a 2-mile route through a forest and mountains. The hike takes about 2 hours, making it a good workout for tourists and athletes. Kathy did not have a car, so she planned to bike to the trail and then walk to clear her mind. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, Kathy set off, reached the trail, and locked her bike to a nearby road sign in the parking lot before beginning her hike. Unbeknownst to her, terrible danger was awaiting her. Less than an hour later, several tourists walking the trail noticed a suspicious trail on the path that looked very much like blood, stretching a significant distance before abruptly veering off into dense bushes. Following the trail, the witnesses were horrified to find Kathy's body hidden in the bushes. The area was quiet and considered safe, located just a few hundred meters from the start of the trail. The eyewitnesses immediately called the police. While waiting for police, they inspected the area and found material evidence, which they handed over to the police. Unfortunately, this may have compromised critical evidence. When police and paramedics arrived, the body was identified as Kathy Sposito, a local student. She had been the victim of a brutal attack. The crime scene was horrific. 2 large rocks with blood and hair stains were found near her body, indicating that she had been hit multiple times in the head. Additionally, marks on her face and head indicated that she had been hit with a wrench. A local tourist later picked up the wrench and gave it to the police, inadvertently contaminating the evidence. Kathy suffered a hit by bullets wound to the eye from a .22 caliber pistol and a deep stab wound to the neck. The level of violence was shocking, suggesting that the attacker did not intend for Kathy to live. The medical examiner determined that Kathy's cause of death was traumatic brain injury and subsequent blood loss. Although there were no signs of rape because Kathy was fully clothed, later reports indicated that there may have been injuries to her genitals, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have intended to sexually assault her, but was stopped before committing the act. Abel's with her, and none of her belongings were disturbed, suggesting that robbery was not the motive behind the crime. The brutality of the attack shocked the community, raising fears that a mass attack was underway. As a result, a once peaceful area became dangerous and unsafe for all. Kathy's family and friends were devastated by her death. She appeared to have no enemies and was not involved in any illegal activities. She had a clean record with no history of mental health problems. The attack appeared random and brutal, leaving even experienced police officers baffled. 3 witnesses, children playing soccer on a nearby field next to the parking lot, reported hearing screams for help. However, they were frightened and did not know how to react because there were no adults around. A man on the other side of the trail also reported hearing a woman scream, but because of the echoes around him, he could not determine where help was needed. The densely wooded area, with steep hills and foliage, provided the perfect hiding place for a criminal to hide. According to the forensic expert, Kathy's death was almost instantaneous due to the severe head injuries she sustained. Her body was then dragged into the underbrush to conceal it from view. The entire attack occurred swiftly and violently, leaving little opportunity for anyone to intervene. As the police lacked any leads or suspects, they issued a public warning to alert hikers and walkers in the area to exercise caution. Informational signs along the trail warn visitors to be careful of bush, especially in isolated areas with dense vegetation. The area around the body was carefully secured. However, the crime scene was disturbed before the investigation began. Visitors who discovered Kathy accidentally trampled and contaminated the area, including potential footprints of the perpetrator. Furthermore, the first aid given to Kathy also inadvertently removed vital evidence from the body and created additional traces. The situation became worse when some tourists directly holding a wrench were discovered at the scene, leaving their fingerprints. DNA analysis techniques were not yet developed at that time, seriously hindering the investigation. 3 days after Kathy's body was discovered, on June 16, 2015, police announced that no suspects had been identified and there was no evidence of rape. Although some evidence was found, it was contaminated, and the technology available at the time was not advanced enough to properly analyze it. In an effort to gather more information, a public appeal was placed in a local newspaper, hoping to encourage potential witnesses to come forward. Police also interviewed people who had been at the park that morning, focusing on 2 people who were closest to the scene. Police made a specific appeal to these people, assuming that they might have noticed suspicious activity. Unfortunately, no one responded to the appeal. In a subsequent effort to gather more information, police decided to re-interview witnesses, particularly children, who may have heard something that could aid the investigation. Unfortunately, their search for these people yielded no clues. In the 1990s, with the advent of DNA testing as a widely used investigative method, the police sent the evidence to a laboratory for analysis and obtained test results. It is worth noting that the accuracy of DNA testing results at that time was significantly lower than it is today, and there was a high risk of getting inaccurate data. The forensic results showed traces of DNA from Kathy and an unidentified man. Upon further investigation, the DNA matched that of the forensic expert who performed Kathy's autopsy. This aroused suspicion among the police. Despite the strange coincidence, the forensic expert was arrested and questioned. He claimed that the DNA must have been accidentally transferred during the autopsy, which was a plausible explanation. The forensic expert then presented a solid alibi, and he had no previous connection to Kathy or motive for the crime, ultimately eliminating him as a suspect. The investigation hit a dead end, and for years, the police found no new leads. The failure of the police to find the culprit and bring him to justice caused widespread outrage. In an effort to find the perpetrator, several volunteer groups formed to conduct their own investigations. They utilized social media and gathered information, but found no valuable leads. Over time, similar brutal murders did not occur. This could indicate that the attack was personally motivated, targeting Kathy, or that the perpetrator went into hiding to avoid drawing attention to himself or perhaps moved elsewhere to continue committing crimes. A new police team was then assembled to re-examine the crime scene and collect evidence. A seasoned police officer was appointed to the investigation. A promising lead emerged in the early 2000s. However, police attention was diverted by more recent cases that took priority, hindering progress in this case. After years of no further information came to light, Kathy's brother reopened the investigation in 2016. They returned to the crime scene, interviewed park staff and visitors, and appealed to the public for any information that might help move the case forward. Kathy's relatives reached out to her former classmates and fellow students, expressing their frustration that the killer remained at large. In an effort to reinvigorate the case, the family funded the creation of several posters that were displayed on advertising boards throughout the city. They also handed out flyers with details about the murder, aiming to inform as many people as possible in the area. The widespread use of modern communication tools, social media, and news outlets helped disseminate the information. As a result, Kathy's case once again attracted the attention of the state and the public after 30 years. A team of 6 experienced police officers was formed, determined to solve the case. However, they faced difficulties, as decades had passed since the murder, and many physical evidence and clues had been damaged or lost over time. Furthermore, the team had to deal with current cases, which limited the time they could spend analyzing evidence and following up on past testimony. The sheriff announced news about the case in a 2020 press conference, and despite the initial expectation of a breakthrough, progress was slow. A year after the sheriff's announcement, the police team investigating Kathy's case focused on analyzing DNA evidence collected in the 1990s and made a major discovery. A DNA match opened up new lines of investigation. An earlier police team was also formed, but eventually stalled. In contrast, the current police team prioritizes DNA analysis, hoping to finally close the case with Kathy's family and find the killer. The Kathy Sposito case went unsolved, despite attracting considerable attention in the 1990s. 3 years after Kathy's attack, a similar case occurred in the same area. A stranger attacked a young girl, hitting her over the head with a rock, but fortunately, her injuries were not as severe as Kathy's. The attacker dragged the girl into the bushes and raped her. The girl managed to free herself and flee, while the attacker was unable to catch up, hampered by his sagging pants. The case bore disturbing similarities to Kathy's attack, with the main difference being that the girl miraculously escaped her attacker. The second victim also reported her incident to the police, which led to an investigation. Although police collected DNA evidence, the case was ultimately closed and inconclusive. The victim, who wished to remain anonymous because she was still afraid of her attacker, provided a detailed description of the attacker. What puzzled police was that the victim believed her attacker was a teenager. Police officer Rich Winston suspects that the similar nature of the crimes and the close proximity of the attacks suggest that both attacks were likely committed by the same person. Because there was suspicion that the same perpetrator had been involved in both cases, the DNA of the perpetrator in the second victim's case was sent to a laboratory in Paran for genealogical analysis using a groundbreaking DNA technique. This method involves searching an extensive DNA database to find potential matches to relatives of the DNA owner. Using databases beyond those related to crime can help identify suspects even if they have no criminal record. Several public companies in the United States collect DNA samples from people who voluntarily submit them, often to search for their ancestors or long-lost relatives. Millions of people are in these databases, creating a huge data pool. Through the investigation, the list of potential suspects was narrowed down to 2: the Bennett brothers, who lived in Pret at the time of Kathy's attack. Notably, Both brothers had troubled pasts, growing up in disadvantaged environments and having had previous run-ins with the law. Police were initially drawn to Brian Scott Bennett for his violent behavior, including a sexual assault. Born on July 30, 1970, Brian was a teenager at the time of the attack, matching the age described by another victim. However, Rich Winston, the police officer leading the case, found this difficult to accept, as the extent of Kathy's injuries led him to believe that an older, more experienced killer had been involved. Rich even questioned the lab results and requested a retest. However, the results were accurate, confirming Brian's involvement in the crime. Brian dropped out of school in Kent and spent time in Prescott, Arizona from around 1980 to 1988. In 1989, Brian joined the Army, but his service was relatively short-lived. He returned to Prescott a year later, but didn't stay for long. Over the next few years, Brian moved around, living in California, Kansas, and North Carolina. His childhood and youth were marked by difficulties. Like many young people, Brian enjoyed partying at a young age. However, this lifestyle led to trouble, and he spent a short time in prison in Arizona for forging documents and checks. Brian's sentence ended in 1993. It is a disturbing fact that since his release, Brian has been involved in 4 assaults. Although he was charged in these cases, they never went to trial due to lack of evidence. In the end, Brian was acquitted of the charges. It was believed that his first victim was Kathy, who unfortunately did not survive the attack, and the second was a girl who managed to survive on the trail. The same day, he attacked another girl at a house party. According to her statement, he got her drunk and tried to rape her. He dragged her into a spare room, locked the door, and hoped no one would hear her screams. However, the other partygoers understood the situation and broke down the door. Brian escaped through a window, but was arrested the next day. Despite the arrest, the court was unable to prove his guilt in the case. The key issue was the inconsistent testimonies from witnesses, largely due to the fact that everyone had been drinking heavily at the party. Many considered the events that unfolded to be a joke, which ultimately led to the acquittal of the extremely Brian. Given the way Brian attacked his victims, police believe he may have been involved in several crimes in the area over the years. The incident occurred in the summer of 1993. Brian kidnapped a young woman named Renee, threatened her with a knife, and attacked her in her home. He then dragged her into a car and drove away. Fortunately, Brian forgot to turn on his headlights, and a police officer pulled over. Renee immediately reported to the police that she was a victim of kidnapping. Brian was arrested and Renee was rescued. Surprisingly, however, Brian was never charged due to lack of evidence. Police have investigated several other cases involving Brian. Among them are 2 survivors of Brian's attacks. One was attacked on a trail, and the other, Renee, was abducted from her home. Both victims identified Brian as the perpetrator from a photograph. With this new information, police need to obtain a DNA sample from Brian to compare with evidence collected at the crime scene. Unfortunately, the investigation hit another snag as police struggled to locate Brian. It was later discovered that he had traveled to several states in the 1990s before returning to his hometown of Kent. There, he lived as a recluse, avoiding contact with anyone. Tragedy struck when neighbors reported a suspicious odor coming from Brian's apartment, and police found Brian dead in his home. It turned out that Brian had taken his own life about 6 months after the attack on Renee. With no suicide note or expression of remorse for Brian's heinous crime, the police continued to pursue justice. In November 2012, Brian's body was exhumed and DNA samples were collected. The results released in March 2013, were conclusive. The sample matched DNA evidence from the crime scene, proving that Brian Scott Bennett was responsible for Kathy's death. Finally, after 36 long years, the case was closed, bringing relief to all those hoping for justice. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Buchanan family. Molly first met Adam Buchanan when she applied for a job as an office manager at his company. At the time, Adam was divorced and raising his son, Nolan, from a previous marriage on his own. The cheerful and outgoing Molly quickly caught Adam's attention. Their mutual interests led to a romance that blossomed into a serious relationship, and eventually, Molly moved in with Adam. Molly became pregnant and their baby was named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a loving family of four. The patriarch of the family owned a construction company, and they purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The rustic cabin had no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. Adam, who worked in construction, became actively involved in renovating it, and the family began visiting regularly. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., members of the Garden Valley Fire Department were called to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, located on Highway 193 between Cool and Georgetown. When they arrived, they found that the fire had burned 10 acres of land, and while the cabin was still smoldering, it was completely destroyed. Fire department personnel found charred remains in the ashes. The fire scene was still intact, and at 11 a.m., firefighters contacted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. At the time, no one understood the severity of the situation. Firefighters suspected that the victim of the wildfire was a pet trapped inside the house. When they arrived, the rest of the house was still smoldering, making it impossible to check inside. They had to wait for the fire to go out and the temperature to drop. While investigating the house, police officers detected an odor similar to that of burning flesh. Police later found a human skull and a charred torso, indicating that a tragedy had occurred. Police called for backup. Officers from the sheriff's office arrived to thoroughly investigate the scene. It became clear that the small, isolated cabin was not the owner's primary residence, but rather a vacation home. A Dodge pickup truck and trailer were discovered on a plot of land near the cabin. Police obtained the license plate number to identify the owner, who may have been affected by the wildfire. It was quickly determined that the truck and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, owned by Adam Buchanan. He lived approximately 160 miles away, in Bonita, California. Police were unsure whether the person inside was Adam Buchanan or someone else. The name of the company owner provided police with their first lead into the investigation. The Bonita police were tasked with checking on the welfare of all members of the Buchanan family. They arrived at the address and parked in the Buchanan driveway, where they saw a white Ford pickup truck. When the officers knocked on the door, Nolan, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage, answered. He was surprised to see the officers in uniform and asked why they were there. In order to avoid alarming anyone in the house, the officers decided to first determine who was inside. Nolan explained that his father, Adam, had gone away for the weekend to their estate, 160 miles away, with Molly and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, and they were expected back that evening. According to Nolan, his father had left him in charge of the house. Police did not yet have enough evidence to confirm that the remains found in the cabin were those of the Buchanans, but the information they gathered, along with the discovery of what they believed to be 2 human remains on the evening of September 13th, was enough to report the family missing from the El Dorado County fire. The following day, September 14th, El Dorado County Police went to the Nolan home to conduct more in-depth interviews and identify the victims of the fire. At the home, officers spoke with Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They mentioned that their son, the owner of the burned-out cabin, had been coming to the cabin to do repairs himself. The parents were very concerned because they had not been able to contact their son or daughter-in-law until that time. From their statements, officers learned that the home was equipped with a generator, but that there was no electricity at the time of the incident. There were also gas tanks inside. This led to two possible explanations: the fire could have been accidental or intentional. By September 15th, the fire had cooled, allowing police to collect evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit. Detective James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office reported finding new remains, which changed the direction of the investigation. Police discovered a skull fragment with a bullet hole. At that point, it was clear that a homicide had occurred, and according to the sheriff, it could no longer be considered an accidental fire. The remains were collected and sent for DNA testing. In the first set of remains, a bullet was found lodged in the victim's thigh. The bullet-riddled skull was identified as that of a child. There was now no doubt that the fire had been used to cover up the crime. Police initially focused on whether anyone in his profession might have had a grudge against him. They also looked into Molly's life to see if she had any enemies who might have committed the crime. When those leads proved fruitless, police began looking into Molly and Adam's marital problems, which uncovered more problems. Police discovered that Molly and Adam's relationship had deteriorated significantly over time and that at the time of the murders, they had been sleeping in separate rooms for some time. A diary belonging to Molly detailed instances of abuse by Adam. Witnesses reported that Adam had not only abused Molly, but also abused children. Molly's mother, Susie Slanker, expressed to police that she feared that the couple might seriously harm each other during their arguments. Although Molly did not end her relationship with Adam, she would occasionally leave with her son to stay at her parents' house, returning after a few days until the next argument. It was also revealed that the couple enjoyed hunting in the area near their vacation home. Since both were armed, the police hypothesized that during an argument, one of them picked up a gun and shot the other, then, realizing the seriousness of the situation, committed suicide. There was a notable contradiction. If the tragedy had been caused by a conflict between husband and wife, there should have been a weapon found near one of them. However, no weapon was found. The police thought that the weapon might have been destroyed in the fire, making identification more difficult. For 5 days, members of the forensic team meticulously sifted through the ashes of the house. Despite a thorough search, they did not find any weapons. At this point, the medical examiner confirmed that the DNA found on the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son Gavin. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the shot made it unlikely that they had committed suicide. The absence of a gun suggested that a 4th person had been present in the home who had shot the Buchanans, prompting a complete reopening of the investigation. Police turned to the victim's 16-year-old son, Nolan. He told police that the family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. Nolan explained that his father had chosen to use the company truck instead of their personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because he had loaded it with rocks for landscaping near their country cabin. The truck was later found near the burned-out cabin. When asked why Nolan did not go on vacation with his relatives, he explained, as he had in his first interview, that he needed to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolan also mentioned that a neighbor was illegally planting trees on the edge of the Buchanan property, which led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor. His father would often demand that the neighbor stop planting trees and threaten to call the police. Nolan spoke about the difficulties of the family business, revealing that the company was facing serious financial problems. The company was downsizing, with only 5 employees remaining. According to his father, debts were mounting rapidly. The investigation identified a suspect, a neighbor. The main problem was that no one could identify which neighbors were involved. The police went door to door, interviewing homeowners in the area. This approach paid off when they found a man who confirmed that he had argued with Adam about growing an illegal crop. However, he claimed that the disagreement ended after a tense conversation and that he had an alibi. After confirming the neighbor's alibi, the police investigated the family's financial situation, as their business was struggling. On September 18th, police went to Adam's company to talk to the employees. Nolan's words were correct. The company was in dire straits, facing bankruptcy with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, several employees were fired. Several of these former employees were very unhappy about being fired, making them potential suspects in the case. This aspect provided an important lead for the police. Over the weekend, the local high school held a community cleanup day. Students worked to clear debris from a park located about a mile from Adam's construction company. During the cleanup on September 19th, they discovered a small wallet containing Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's wallets and identification cards, hidden under one of the bushes. There was also a .22 caliber rifle nearby. Police were dispatched to the scene immediately. The county sheriff's office has since developed a new theory. The suspect may have used the rifle to kill the Buchanans and, to conceal the crime, remove their identification from the scene. This finding is significant because it suggests that someone traveled from Bonita to Greenwood to kill the family and then returned to Bonita to dispose of the evidence and the weapon. This suspect is likely a Bonita resident. The location of the evidence near Buchanan Construction supports the idea that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Police have sent the gun and bag of documents for analysis and are seeking a search warrant for the company's records and premises. During their search, police accessed a video surveillance camera located on the company's premises. Fortunately, the camera focused on the parking lot, not the company's premises. Surveillance footage showed the family had left town on Friday, so police reviewed footage from that day. They were surprised to see that Adam had hooked up a trailer full of rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had claimed. Police discovered that Nolan had deliberately interfered with the investigation. If the white Ford had pulled the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the Buchanan family's driveway. Police decided to interview Nolan again. Nolan repeated his account of the weekend, where he had been, and who he had met, but this time they also asked him about the movie he had seen at the theater and how he had paid for his shopping at the mall. When asked how he paid for dessert on their date, Nolan said he used his father's credit card. Police then obtained a search warrant for Buchanan's Bonita home, inspected his vehicles and reviewed his financial records. They found a Ford parked in the driveway, which they carefully inspected. They noticed red dirt on the tires, which matched the dirt found in Greenwood. If the Ford had made the trip the previous weekend or earlier, some dirt might have remained. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed the tire tracks near the cabin, but the accumulation of dirt suggested the car may have been in Greenwood recently. Officers tracked the bank card transactions and discovered that Adam Buchanan used his credit card at Taco Bell on Friday, September 11th, while traveling to Greenwood. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed he was home, not with his parents, and had a credit card with him. Police went to the diner and reviewed security footage, confirming their suspicions. A white Ford was seen instead of a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt from September 11th showing 4 drinks purchased, not 3. Additionally, evidence at the scene of the fire showed the presence of 4 drink cups, confirming that Nolan had been in the car. The next credit card transaction occurred on Saturday, September 12th, at the Valencia Club Bar in Pennon, about 30 minutes from the cabin. Adam's parents had alerted detectives to the bar, saying their son and daughter-in-law often went there after working on renovating the cabin. Security cameras recorded the moment the couple left the bar, and highway traffic cameras tracked their route. A Ford F-150 was seen heading toward the Buchanan cabin at 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire, and then driving in the opposite direction at 3:30 a.m. In the first instance, cameras captured Adam and Molly in the car. In the second, only Nolan was recorded. Hours later, on the morning of Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used at 3 locations owned by Bonita: Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed to police that Buchanan had only one bank card. This information contradicted Nolan's accounts. At this time, forensic results showed that Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun. He was arrested in the classroom. Nolan Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him and attempted to twist the story by claiming that his father had shot his family. He said his father had pointed a gun at him, and in self-defense he took the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolan maintained that it was self-defense, claiming that the fire and his subsequent lies were due to his panic and extreme fear. He explained that he had doused the house with gasoline and set it on fire to cover it up. The defense repeatedly pointed to Adam's abusive behavior toward his son and other family members to the jury. The medical examiner raised doubts about the verdict, noting that the gunshot wound to Gavin's skull indicated it was fired at a nearly 90 degrees angle. Nolan, meanwhile, claimed that he and his brother's beds were next to each other and that they were both awakened by noises and screams. At that point, Nolan allegedly saw someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin. The shooter then pointed the rifle at Nolan, who was able to push the attacker away. According to this account, the shot would have come from about a 45 degrees angle, which is inconsistent with forensic evidence. The prosecution believes Nolan shot his younger brother Gavin while they were home alone, as their parents were at a bar. After waiting for their father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot them as well. The position of the bodies suggested that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Nolan then took his rifle, his parents' papers, poured gasoline over the bodies, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met his girlfriend, and spent the day with her to establish his alibi. On July 13, 2018, a jury convicted Nolan Buchanan of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Schmidt family. Tyler Schmidt was born on November 13, 1979, in Iowa, USA. He spent his childhood in Cedar Falls, a city home to the University of Northern Iowa. Tyler's early interests led him to join the Boy Scouts, where he earned the distinguished rank of Eagle Scout. This experience fostered his lasting love for nature and the outdoors. Growing up, Tyler enjoyed participating in camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which often brought his family together. Outside of school, he developed skills in playing the trumpet. However, his true passions lay in adventure and sports. At Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls, Tyler was a member of the cross-country running team and the swim team. During his free time, he also enjoyed outdoor activities such as canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. Tyler's interest in computing led him to Missouri's Truman State University, where he pursued a degree in computer science and met the woman who would become his wife, Sarah. Born in Kansas City on March 27, 1980, Sarah grew up near St. Louis with her siblings, Karen, Jane, and Adam, for part of her childhood. Sarah shared Tyler's passion for the outdoors, particularly bird watching and studying insects. Both had been heavily involved in scouting as young people, with Sarah earning the Girl Scouts' highest honor, the Gold Award. She credited her adventurous spirit to her mother, with whom she had gone backpacking in Central America. Given their compatibility and mutual interests, Tyler knew he had found his soulmate when he met Sarah. Sarah was a high-achieving student who excelled both academically and in leadership. As a result of her outstanding leadership skills, her the prestigious Truman Scholarship while she was still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This scholarship led her to attend Truman State University, where she met her future husband, Tyler. The couple started dating and eventually got engaged. Both families were supportive of their decision to marry, as they believed the two were meant to be together and start a beautiful family. On June 22, 2002, friends and family gathered at St. John Lutheran Church in Cedar Falls for Tyler and Sarah's special day. Guests took their seats under the guidance of the wedding coordinators, with Tyler's parents and Sarah's mother seated at the front, joined by her nearby siblings. Tyler's uncles and cousins were also in attendance. Sarah stood outside, preparing to make her grand entrance at her wedding ceremony. She was accompanied by her father, who would escort her down the aisle and give her away to her fiancé. The ceremony was a promise of love and commitment between the 22-year-old couple, who vowed to stand by each other until the end of their lives. Following the wedding, Tyler and Sarah embarked on a romantic 10-day honeymoon to the breathtaking Boundary Waters, a wilderness area on the U.S.-Canada border, situated between Minnesota and Ontario. This destination was chosen for its natural beauty, reflecting the couple's shared love of nature. After Tyler and Sarah got married, they focusing on building economic stability and advancing their careers. Following the completion of their bachelor's degrees in Missouri, they relocated to Lawrence and attended the University of Kansas. There, Sarah pursued a master's degree and later worked as a computer science expert, while Tyler divided his time among various roles, including jobs at a supermarket, a delivery company, UPS, and 18 years at a company that handled business billing and payments. During their early years of marriage, Tyler and Sarah maintained a balance between their professional lives and personal adventures. They made time for each other and regularly explored new outdoor destinations. The couple was social and enjoyed hosting family game nights and gathering with friends to play board games. They also participated in local community activities through the Lutheran Church and actively supported the Kansas Jayhawks basketball team, often attending tournaments at the Allen Fieldhouse. 2013 is a bittersweet year for Tyler and Sarah. It was the year Sarah's father unexpectedly passed away due to a heart attack, causing immense grief for his loved ones. However, in the same year, they welcomed their first child, Arlo, after 11 years of marriage. In 2015, the family grew again, with the birth of their beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt, on September 17th. 3 years later, when their children were 6 and 3, the family decided to relocate to Cedar Falls to be near Tyler's relatives. The community of Cedar Falls provided they a warm welcome, and they quickly became involved in local activities. Tyler maintained his software engineering job, while Sarah started working as a librarian's assistant at the local public library. Their children, Arlo and Lula, began attending preschool at Lincoln Elementary School. Known for their kind and helpful nature, Tyler and Sarah made those around them feel valued. This endearing quality earned them the love and respect of their neighbors and the community. Sarah's friendly and warm personality also made her a beloved figure at the library, where she was admired by colleagues and patrons alike. Tyler and Sarah made it a priority to share their love for the outdoors with their children, Arlo and Lula, encouraging them to explore and appreciate nature. In 2021, the family began going on camping trips, which the kids greatly enjoyed, even with their busy schedules. As a result, they decided to go on these trips as often as possible. However, by mid-2022, Sarah's work hours had increased substantially, which may have affected their ability to continue this family tradition. However, in June 2022, she took a day off to celebrate a special milestone, her 20th wedding anniversary. She also planned a family vacation to Mata Cave State Park in Jackson County, Iowa, for the week of July 11th. To make time for this trip, she set a deadline for a library project. July 26th, Sarah shared her plans with her sister-in-law, cat, and was looking forward to exploring the park's 13 remarkable caves and beautiful landscapes with her family. On Thursday, July 21st, the Schmidt family embarked on a 140-mile road trip to visit Makata Caves. The family, consisting of Tyler and Sarah, both 42, and their children Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. Due to the crowded camping area. The Schmidts decided to set up their tent near the park's entrance. Later that evening, around 7 p.m., another family, the Sherwins, arrived and parked approximately 200 feet away from the Schmidts' tent. Joe, Cecilia, and their 23-year-old son, Anthony, from Nebraska, had been on a week-and-a-half-long camping trip that took them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. When they were on their way back home, they decided to stop at Makata Caves, setting up 2 tents, one for the parents and another for their son Anthony. Anthony consistently showed great care and consideration for his parents' needs, and earning praise from his mother, who frequently described him as the ideal son, kind, empathetic, and an outstanding student. At the time, Anthony was working on a business venture that involved developing a computer system. He claimed the business had the potential to generate millions and planned to use some of the profits to support his parents financially. However, Cecilia knew very little about the project, as Anthony maintained secrecy and only revealed that he communicated via emails that were heavily encrypted and secure. At Makata Caves, campers had settled in for the night. However, their peaceful night's sleep was disrupted before dawn on July 22nd by the sudden sound of gunshots. A short time earlier, a man wearing black had entered the Schmidt family's tent. Inside, the attacker targeted Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, was jolted awake by the screams of his sister Lula. As he turned to see what was happening, he saw blood and was overcome with fear. Managing to escape the tent, Arlo ran to find help. As he fled, he heard the sound of one final gunshot. Cecilia and Joe, from the adjacent campsite, quickly exited their tent due to the commotion. Joe began searching for his son among the other campers, inquiring if anyone had seen him. Meanwhile, Arlo, still panicked, continued running until he met Cecilia and Joe. He was frantic, shouting and asking for help, explaining that his parents had been shot. Concerned for Arlo's safety, Cecilia took his hand, and together they rushed to the park entrance. She was filled with anxiety, knowing her own son was sleeping near the tent where the shots were fired, and feared he might have been hurt or worse. Cecilia called 911 after hearing gunshots and reported the incident to the operator, but struggled to clearly say the park's name, making it difficult to communicate their exact location. Cecilia also explained that she was with a boy who claimed his parents had been shot. During the 23-minute call, the 911 operator asked Cecilia questions, while simultaneously relaying the attack to police and park rangers. The call was briefly dropped, but Cecilia quickly called back. Despite the chaotic situation and her own nervousness, Cecilia managed to remain calm, thanks in part to adrenaline. Once she had provided more specific location details, Cecilia handed the phone to Arlo. Arlo explained to the operator that he had witnessed a horrific scene at his family's campsite. He said the operator that he was in a tent with his parents and sister, but when he woke up, he saw a person wearing black and holding a gun. When asked about his father's location, the boy was silent for a while, then responding that he thought his father was hurt. At 6:30 a.m., police and paramedics arrived, and after locating the Schmidt's tent, they discovered a horrific scene. All the occupants, including Tyler, Sarah, and Lula, were dead. This previously peaceful campsite had quickly become a crime scene. Police immediately launched a search for the shooter, who could potentially still be in the area. Following the attack, authorities promptly evacuated everyone from Makata Caves State Park and nearby Camp Shalom, a Christian summer camp about 1.5 miles away. The evacuees were assembled outside the park for a head count, which revealed that only one person, Anthony Sherwin, was missing. It was also discovered that Anthony was armed. An aerial search by police helicopters led to the discovery of a man's body at 11 a.m. Once officers reached the location, they found the man was deceased. He was identified as Anthony Sherwin. Preliminary investigations pointed to Anthony as the primary suspect in the murders. Authorities believed he had perpetrated the attack on the Schmidt family before taking his own life. The park was temporarily closed by authorities following the incident, with the closure lifted by July 28. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources offered its condolences for what had occurred. A spokesperson for the department expressed deep sadness and disappointment on behalf of the team, acknowledging that the incident had disrupted the long-standing tradition of Iowa families enjoying the state's natural beauty. However, the department remains committed to continuing its work in preserving the state's parks for the millions of families that visit each year. The citizens of Cedar Falls were deeply shocked when they received the news. The atmosphere in the town drastically somber and mournful. Family, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers were filled with grief. A heartfelt message was displayed in a window at the Cedar Falls Public Library, where Sarah had worked, paying tribute to Tyler, Sarah, and Lula, saying they may have left too soon, but their memories would remain forever in the hearts of those who knew them. After hearing of the tragedy, Tyler's software company mourned him, describing him as a highly skilled and dedicated professional who mentored his colleagues. His colleagues were deeply saddened by the news, remembering Tyler's love for his children, especially his child Arlo. The mayor of Cedar Falls shared his grief on Facebook over the loss of the 3 Schmidt family members. He knew Sarah, with whom he had worked on a technology project in the past. He called on the community to support Arlo, the sole survivor of the family, and shared a GoFundMe link for those wishing to donate. The initiative quickly raised more than $276,000 in just a few days. As a sign of respect for Sarah's co-workers, the local authority closed the library for the remainder of the day. The tragedy also drew reactions from other government leaders. The governor of Iowa conveyed her shock and sorrow over the unimaginable tragedy, while a U.S. House representative from Iowa denounced the crime as senseless and horrific. Sarah's family was deeply saddened by her passing. Her sister was particularly hard-hit, finding it impossible to accept that she would no longer be able to talk to Sarah and that she would miss out on seeing her niece grow up. Family members came from as far away as North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to attend a private funeral service for Sarah at Greenwood Cemetery on August 2nd. A separate celebration of the lives of Tyler, Sarah, and Lula was held at the picnic area of Overman Park, attracting more than 200 people. At the ceremony, Tyler's aunt and the mayor took turns speaking at the podium to express their feelings and share memories of the deceased. The Schmidt family's loved ones struggled to cope with their grief, also as trying to provide comfort and care to Arlo. Meanwhile, authorities pressed on with their investigation into the brutal crime. According to an official update from the Iowa Department of Public Safety, the autopsies revealed crucial information about the victims' causes of death. Tyler sustained both a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. His wife, Sarah, had multiple sharp force injuries, but no gunshot wound. Tragically, their young daughter, Lula, suffered both a gunshot wound and was strangled. In August 2022, authorities identified Anthony Sherwin, a 23 years old with no prior crimes, as the person responsible for the Schmidt family's murder. He acted alone and later ended his own life. Despite the thorough investigation, police were unable to determine a motive for the attack. According to the Assistant Director of Criminal Investigation, Anthony had no connection to the Schmidt family before or during the time the two parties camped near each other. The Nebraska Police Department helped investigate the incident. During a search of the Sherwin family's apartment in Nebraska, officers did not find a suicide note or any other clues that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. A review of Anthony's Facebook page also did not provide any information about the incident or the weapons used. According to the Assistant Director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, the only confirmed weapon found was an unlicensed, hand-assembled firearm discovered near Anthony's body. This type of firearm is often referred to as a ghost gun. Because these guns lack serial numbers, they can be challenging for authorities to track and regulate. To verify the story, the police spoke with Anthony's parents. They confirmed that their son had created his own gun using instructions he found online. His parents described Anthony as very responsible and stressed that he had never hurt anyone or any animals. They also shared that their family had never owned guns before, but due to increasing crime rates in Nebraska, they had recently decided to acquire them. As they were inexperienced with firearms, they even took classes to learn how to handle them. The parents Anthony's had brought a homemade gun on the trip for protection against crime and possible bear attacks, which they had previously encountered while camping. They planned to dispose of the gun after returning home. Anthony's parents believed he was innocent and wanted to prove it. They thought he was a victim of murder, not the killer. His mother pointed to an autopsy report they obtained, which showed he had been shot twice. This contradicted the police claim that he had been shot only once. Anthony's mother questioned how he could have shot himself twice, which raised doubts about the police theory that he had taken his own life. The family Anthony's questioned the attacker's clothing description, as Cecilia remembered telling the 911 operator that the attacker wore black clothes. This did not match Anthony's clothes, green shorts that she had given him the day before the incident. Furthermore, Cecilia and Joe believe the police have withheld important information from them, such as where Anthony's body was found and whether the gun used to kill the family Schmidts was the same gun used to shoot Anthony. They specifically asked investigators if a ballistic test was conducted to confirm any matches, but received no response. Cecilia expressed her concerns in an email to the media. In the email, she said that her son had so many reasons to live, and she was sure that he would not give up everything in such a way. Cecilia also mentioned that she had seen no signs of him planning such an attack. And in her opinion, Anthony did not have the capability to kill. Furthermore, she believed that her son had no connection to the Schmidt family, which raised more questions. When Cecilia reached out to investigators, their response only added to her confusion. They simply mentioned that it was a random murder. Anthony's parents asked to see the final investigation report so they could arrange for a private review to be conducted. However, they state that they never received a response to this request. Around the same time, in January 2023, a news organization also requested public documents related to the case, but was still waiting for them. According to Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act, a request was made for various documents related to the case, including incident reports, investigation files, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. However, the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner's office responded that these documents were not publicly available. They could only release basic information about the case, which had already been included in the press release and its supplementary links. A few days after the inquiry, the media outlet sent an email to the official asking if the gun Anthony used to kill himself was the same one used in the Schmidt family murders or not. The official did not respond. So far, the police believe Anthony was a random killer who brutally murdered family Schmidt by shooting, stabbing, and strangling them. This conviction stands unless new evidence surfaces to prove otherwise. Anthony was also murdered, and those who knew him described him as kind, studious, and innocent. Following traumatic incident, Arlo, the sole survivor of a massacre, came to live with his relatives in Cedar Falls, CU the law on Tres Quasera. Recently, in an interview, Sarah's brother expressed admiration for Arlo's courage and the young boy's remarkable mental resilience. Following the tragedy, a fundraising page on GoFundMe was established to collect money for Arlo's care and to create a fund that will support his future education. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Yvonne Baldelli. Yvonne Baldelli, born Fold, was born on June 30, 1969, in a small town in sunny Southern California. She was the third and youngest child of Marjorie and James Fold and grew up with her brother Michael and sister Michelle, with whom she developed a particularly close relationship from an early age. When Yvonne was 13, her mother passed away after a long illness. A year later, her father remarried Leland F.A., and the grown children developed a wonderful relationship with their stepmother, who was a kind and caring woman who loved her husband's children as her own. Yvonne received a solid education and explored many career paths, but her main passion was always fashion design, and she dreamed of turning her hobby into a profitable business. However, luck never seemed to be on her side when it came to her personal life. She had been married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce. Additionally, a surgery she underwent as a young woman, followed by complications, left Yvonne unable to have children. After her divorce from her second husband, Kevin Baldelli, in 2007, Yvonne lived alone in her small apartment with her dog, whom she affectionately called Baby. She kept in regular contact with her father and sister, calling them almost every day and trying to see her family at least once a month. In 2009, as Yvonne was preparing to celebrate her 40th birthday, she met a Marine named Brian Brimmager. At the time, he was legally married and had a young son with his wife. Despite this, Brian was open about his extramarital affair and shared with Yvonne that he was unhappy in his marriage, claiming that he had not filed for divorce only because he did not want to hurt his child. Yvonne fell in love with this handsome, tanned, healthy man at first sight and believed every word he said. Having experienced the pain of a loveless marriage herself and knowing how difficult it is to leave such a relationship, she did not push her partner, believing that the presence of a child was the main obstacle. However, Brian was not as straightforward and sincere as he seemed. From a young age, his attractive appearance made him very popular with the opposite sex. He was used to juggling several relationships at once and skillfully deceived the women who fell in love with him, promising each of them marriage, a family, and eternal love. It was soon discovered that the married Brian had not only met Yvonne but had also had another mistress. This other woman was Christine Verhoeven, a gorgeous blonde with many connections. She was a White House analyst. When Yvonne learned about another rival, she decided to tackle the situation directly and fight for the man she loved. Summoning her courage, she contacted Brian's wife to reveal that he was cheating on her with two women. This revelation caused a heated debate, forcing Brian to make a difficult decision. In the end, he chose Yvonne, though it's possible she influenced his choice. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with Yvonne. At that time, he was still in the Marines but had been thinking about leaving his military career. The couple appeared genuinely happy, but Yvonne's family remained skeptical of Brian, questioning the sincerity of his feelings. In the summer of 2011, Brian expressed his desire to make significant changes in his life. He wanted to leave the military, move away from the busy city, and settle on a tropical island. Yvonne felt the same way. She supported him completely and was ready to go wherever he chose. She believed he was the most important person in her life and loved him deeply. By September of that year, they had made their decision. The couple would move to Panama and live on the small island of Carino, which they considered a true paradise. Yvonne told her family about her plans just before leaving, so they didn't have a chance to convince her to change her mind. She sold her apartment, quit her job, and began packing for the trip. Yvonne packed only a few bikinis, shorts, tank tops, and her sewing machine, aiming to start a small boutique where she could create and sell custom outfits for tourists on the new island. In early September, Brian, Yvonne, and her beloved little dog flew to Panama. They spent a few days in the capital before taking a ferry to Carino Island, where they rented a house right by the ocean. The climate was hot and humid, with consistent temperatures year-round, which attracted many tourists, especially those interested in diving and surfing. The island was only 1 square kilometer in size, allowing visitors to walk around it in about an hour. Most of the infrastructure was located along the coast, while the interior consisted of dense jungle and swampy areas filled with venomous snakes, spiders, and other wildlife, making it dangerous to explore. Brian, a talented guitar player since he was young, brought his guitar hoping to start a musical career by performing in local entertainment venues on the island. Within a week of moving, he had contacted with several local bar owners, and one of them offered him a job. He performed in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, but his audience often bought him drinks, which led him to drink heavily almost every day. Yvonne's business was growing very slowly, facing poor sales and making little profit. Nevertheless, she remained determined. She took a job at one of the bars and adopted a second dog she found on the island. Yvonne communicated with her sister, Michelle, almost every day, sharing updates, but her messages became shorter and more gloomy, causing concern for her family. The couple initially enjoyed their first few months on the island, feeling like they were in paradise. Yvonne dreamed that Brian would propose and they would have a romantic wedding by the ocean. However, as time went on, Brian didn't seem eager to get married, and their relationship began to decline. By early December, Michelle noticed that Yvonne had stopped messaging her, which made her worry. Then, on December 14, 2011, Brian unexpectedly called Michelle to ask when he could come by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in her family garage before going to Panama. This call surprised Michelle because it meant that Brian was back in the US and wanted to pick up his car. She wondered where Yvonne was and why she hadn't returned or even contacted her. Brian said he had detailed everything in an email sent a few days ago. He also said that his ex-girlfriend had supposedly messaged Yvonne about the situation. Michelle looked at her messages but found nothing, so she checked her email. She discovered 2 unread messages, one from her younger sister and another from him. In his messages, Brian stated that Yvonne had left him, running away to Costa Rica with a new lover. Another message, purportedly from Yvonne, claimed that she had left Brian after discovering his affair and learning that another woman had given birth to his child. The message ended with her stating that she had met another man and gone to Costa Rica with him. The other woman turned out to be Brian's old friend, Christine, with whom he had been involved for a long time and who was pregnant with his child when he and Yvonne flew to Panama. At first glance, everything seemed reasonable, especially since Yvonne was unable to have children. The news that her partner had fathered a child with someone else would have been extremely distressing for her. However, Yvonne was not known for acting impulsively, and she would certainly have called her younger sister to discuss such a major change in her life. Furthermore, the tone of the message purportedly from Yvonne was somewhat strange and unlike her previous communications, which raised further suspicions. When Michelle attempted to determine her younger sister's current whereabouts, she was unable to obtain any concrete information. Calls went unanswered, and incoming messages were brief and discreet, stating things like, "I'm fine, I need time," and "I'm not ready to talk about this." Michelle suggested that Brian file a missing persons report. Brian appeared concerned but insisted that it was unnecessary, asserting that Yvonne was fine, capable of taking care of herself, and would decide when to return home. Although Brian was reluctant to even discuss the matter and hurriedly left after getting the car, a message from Yvonne's phone soon arrived, stating that she planned to return home in January for their father's birthday. This message relieved Michelle, and she decided to wait a few more weeks, hoping that Yvonne would return as stated in the message. By mid-January, not only had Yvonne not returned home, but she had also not called once during that time, and her messages had stopped altogether. Furthermore, Michelle was shocked to learn that Brian had married Christine just before New Year's, which seemed very strange since he had broken up with his ex-girlfriend just weeks before the celebration. Worried, Michelle eventually went to the police department and reported her younger sister missing, suspecting that Yvonne had not gone to Costa Rica. An official investigation sent to Panama, the results showed that Yvonne had not left the country. Michelle then asked her cousin, a programmer, to help track down the IP address from which Yvonne had sent the messages, determining their true origin. It turned out that the emails purportedly sent by Yvonne from Costa Rica in December were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was staying. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. As the situation became increasingly alarming, Michelle rushed to inform the police of her discovery. Michelle contacted the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her younger sister in Panama and then continued to send text messages and emails from her phone, pretending to be her for about a month. However, there was not enough solid evidence at the time to arrest him, so law enforcement could only interview him and continue to gather evidence of his guilt. It was revealed that Brian had proposed to Christine while still in Panama with Yvonne. He promised Christine that he would return soon, that they would marry, and that they would raise their daughter together. Furthermore, Christine did not know that Brian had come to the island with Yvonne, as he had told her he was there on business. The family's investigation began 2 months after Yvonne's disappearance when her sister and niece flew to Panama themselves. There, they sought the help of Don Winter, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator specializing in finding missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Yvonne's disappearance and Brian's version of events. After listening to them, Don immediately expressed concern that the possibility of Yvonne being alive was very low. With extensive experience in such investigations and leveraging her connections, Don decided to put pressure on the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning the disappearance of an American woman into international news. A press conference was held with the participation of Yvonne's family members. Later, Yvonne's father, stepmother, brother, and several other close relatives and friends traveled to Panama to join the search and assist in the investigation. Together, they went to the tropical island of Carino, searched thoroughly, but found no trace of Yvonne. Their search efforts were hampered by dense bushes and swamps filled with wild animals. In addition, the family asked the islanders how well they knew Brian and Yvonne and what they could tell them. It turned out that the couple had been drinking heavily recently and often argued loudly, disregarding those around them. They were seen at the bar almost every day, drinking and arguing violently. Furthermore, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Yvonne's face and body. She hardly ever took off her sunglasses, apparently to hide the bruises under her eyes. The couple's landlord confirmed that neighbors frequently complained about noise, screaming, and swearing coming from their residence. At the same time, FBI agents brought a special team of divers to the island to search for any potential evidence or remains of her. Unfortunately, these searches also yielded no results. Brian was initially the prime suspect in the case, but there was no concrete evidence to charge him. He denied any involvement, repeatedly telling the same story about his ex-partner running off with another man. It was not until September 21, 2012, that Brian was questioned and his home searched. At the time, his wife, Christine, was at work while Brian, unemployed, stayed home with the children and immersed in his beloved game of golf. Initially, he appeared confident, recalling that Yvonne had left him after discovering his child with another woman. However, he became visibly concerned and the police mentioned that the last messages sent under Yvonne's name came from his area and expressed interest in examining the laptop found on his desk. The confiscated laptop turned out to be Yvonne's, with messages sent from it after she had supposedly fled. A photo of Yvonne with a bruise under her eye was found on the computer, as well as a screenshot of a conversation from November in which Brian and Christine discussed their ongoing affair and the shared custody of their daughter, which is probably how Yvonne learned about them. Furthermore, the laptop search history from November 26, 2011, contained queries such as how to clean blood and how to remove blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were important but circumstantial, as no body or mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had sent messages impersonating Yvonne did not conclusively prove his guilt. Don soon discovered that before leaving Panama, Brian had sold a machete he owned. In an online chat with a potential buyer, he joked that he had only used the weapon once, to finish off a stripper. The prank was so creepy that authorities tracked down the machete's new owner and confiscated the blade for testing, which initially yielded no reliable results. The long-awaited arrest came when police overlooked another crucial detail: Yvonne's bank card. Brian had used the card after she disappeared to add credibility to his story. Before returning to the United States, he decided to take a trip to Costa Rica and used her card multiple times, creating the illusion that she had actually fled to that country. He paid for his ticket in cash and withdrew money from various locations in San Jose, emptying the card before discarding it. Brian had no idea, however, that he had been caught on surveillance cameras at ATMs. In July 2013, a year and a half after Yvonne disappeared, her relatives, along with evidence collected by the police, FBI, and Don Winter, succeeded in getting Brian arrested. He was initially charged with making false statements and obstructing the investigation due to a lack of stronger evidence at that time. At that point, Brian had recently become a father for the second time, as Christine had given birth to a son just a week before his arrest. Authorities attempted to have an honest conversation with Brian, hoping he would confess to the crime and reveal where the body was, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. His lawyer argued that there was no body and no direct evidence linking Brian to Yvonne's disappearance. 2 months after Brian's arrest, investigators made a shocking discovery in the swamp that significantly advanced the case. On Canaro Island, a worker exploring a shortcut accidentally stumbled upon a partially submerged army backpack in the murky underbrush. Out of curiosity, he opened the bag and was horrified to find a human skull inside. He promptly reported the discovery to the police, who arrived to collect the backpack for further examination. Inside, they found dismembered human remains along with the bodies of 2 small dogs. The remains had been cut into pieces, placed in the bag, and hidden in a spot where they were unlikely to be discovered. DNA tests confirmed that the human remains were those of Yvonne, though some body parts were missing. Pathologists revealed that she had suffered severe trauma prior to her death, including a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. The presence of the dogs suggested a calculated effort to support the narrative, as it seemed unlikely that Yvonne would abandon her beloved pets, implying that they were also killed and buried alongside her. The chop marks on the victim's bones matched the blade of a machete, confirming that the body had been dismembered with this one. Each machete blade has a unique pattern, similar to a fingerprint. As a result of this evidence, Brian was officially charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. In early 2014, Michelle was diagnosed with advanced aggressive cancer. She had been so focused on investigating her younger sister's case that she neglected her own health and put off doctor visits. After 6 months of intensive treatment that didn't work, she chose to spend her remaining time fighting for justice for her sister. In September 2014, doctors informed Michelle that she had only a few weeks to live. Despite her illness, she vowed to continue advocating for her sister until her last moments. She decided to testify in front of Brian, sharing everything she knew and providing all correspondence with Yvonne to the court. She carefully recounted Brian's actions following her sister's disappearance, but then fainted from exhaustion. Michelle died 3 days later. The prosecution contended that on the night of November 26, after another argument with Yvonne over Brian's messages to Christine, Brian, fueled by anger and alcohol, attacked Yvonne and fatally stabbed her. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub with a machete, using the same weapon to kill Yvonne's dogs, and placed their remains in his military backpack. The limbs that couldn't fit in the bag were discarded in the ocean, thrown off a rocky cliff early in the morning, along with a blood-stained mattress. Brian then carried the backpack deep into the island and submerged it in a swamp. For the following weeks, he stayed in the same coastal house, carefully removing any traces of the crime. He told the locals a convincing story about his girlfriend leaving him for another man, which led them to sympathize with him. He even found a new girlfriend, Nicole Powell, who comforted him for a few weeks until he left for the U.S. During the trial, Nicole testified against Brian, accusing him of dishonesty and being cruel. With strong evidence against him, Brian admitted his guilt but argued it was in self-defense, claiming that Yvonne had attacked him first with a knife, which he then used to defend himself. He stated that everything that happened afterward was due to shock, insisting he didn't remember dismembering her body or handling the dogs. However, his internet searches and efforts to destroy evidence showed that he was fully aware of his actions and tried to create a false narrative to explain Yvonne's disappearance. In the spring of 2016, Brian was convicted of manslaughter and received a 26-year prison sentence, with the chance for parole in 2035. His prior service in the Marines was taken into account during sentencing, which helped him avoid a life sentence. Additionally, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, expressed her belief in his innocence and her unwavering support for him. The tragic case of Yvonne Baldelli highlights not only the devastating impact of domestic violence and deceit, but also the tireless pursuit of justice by her family. Despite the initial fog of lies and misdirection, the truth ultimately emerged, revealing a chilling narrative of betrayal and loss. Yvonne's story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of vigilance and support for those in perilous situations, urging us to seek justice for victims and ensure that their voices are never silenced. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sydney Loof. Sydney Irene Loof was born on August 21, 1993, in Broken Bow, Nebraska. She grew up in Arcadia with her parents, George and Susie Loof. In 2000, when she was in second grade, her family moved to Norfolk. Her mother, Susie, worked as a special education teacher, and her father, George, was a school principal. Sydney was an active child and enjoyed a happy childhood filled with a love of nature. She loved fishing, an activity her father often took her to do. During her school years, she participated in basketball and golf, and showed outstanding potential in both sports. However, she developed scoliosis, which affected the curvature of her spine and forced her to give up many of her favorite hobbies and sports. In 2011, after finishing high school, Sydney began working at a Menards store that focused on home improvement products. The Loof family was very attached, and when Sydney needed to move from Norfolk to Lincoln for her job, they all made an effort to stay in touch nearly every day and often gathered for dinner. Although Sydney lived on her own, she frequently returned to her parents' house. Recently, however, she had been dealing with depression and felt that her medications were not helping, but rather worsening her condition. Susie, concerned for her daughter, recommended a new doctor who prescribed different medications for her. During phone calls with her mom, Sydney expressed that she was starting to feel normal again, sounding quite optimistic. She was trying to make positive changes in her life and was searching for a new job. Working in a store wasn't her ultimate goal. She felt there was more out there for her. However, she was uncertain about her career path and what she truly wanted, which contributed to her feelings of depression. In November 2017, Sydney's mental health worsened, leading her to start taking antidepressants and occasionally smoke marijuana. Although her family and friends were very supportive, but she was looking for more than just companionship. She wanted love. Being young and modern, Sydney was interested in women, so she often searched for dates on social media. She used Tinder, an app that helps people connect for dating, to find friends and romantic interests. During that month, she matched with a girl named Audrey, who responded to her message. They began chatting and discovered they shared many interests, including gambling, hiking, and enjoying good food. After exchanging about 100 messages, Sydney and Audrey decided to meet in person on November 14th. Sydney traveled to Audrey's house in Wilbur, and their first meeting was a success, leaving Sydney very happy. They enjoyed each other's company and agreed to meet again at Audrey's house on November 15th. After finishing her shift at the store, Sydney went home to get ready. She cleaned up, styled her hair, and did her makeup before heading out. She took a selfie and posted it on Tinder with the caption, "Ready for date." Shortly after posting, she received a message from Audrey, who was waiting for her in the car. The following day, Sydney failed to arrive at work. Her family, who had noticed her recent happiness due to a new friend, became worried. When her co-workers reported her absence, they were surprised, as this behavior was uncharacteristic of their responsible daughter. Susie mentioned that Sydney had been struggling with anxiety and severe depression. Just days before she went missing, Sydney had spoken with her family about her worsening mental health, and they had recommended that she see a doctor to resume her antidepressant medication. That was the last time her family saw her. Sydney's parents visited her apartment and were shocked to find that Sydney had left her beloved cat, Mimsy, without food or water. This was very unusual for Sydney, as they knew how much she cared for her cat and never left it alone for long periods. Worried for her well-being, they reported Sydney missing to the police. The apartment was locked. And when the police conducted a welfare check, they found nothing unusual. However, the family insisted that something was wrong, and the police took their concerns seriously. On November 16, 2017, a 5 feet 7 inches blonde named Sydney was reported missing after not showing up for her shift at the Menards store located at 27th Street and Cornhusker Highway. She had a spinal condition that affected her walking, making her easily recognizable. When she went missing, she was wearing a white Columbia jacket and a cream-colored shirt. Her parents told the police that earlier that week, on Wednesday morning, Sydney had shared on Snapchat that she had gone on a date with a woman she met online the previous Tuesday night and planned to see her again that Wednesday evening. Sydney's car was found in Northeast Lincoln, and the police are interviewing people and searching for any clues about her or her location. Her family has been handing out flyers suggesting she may have been abducted 40 miles southwest of Lincoln, where her cell phone last connected. The flyers also mentioned that there has been no activity in her bank account and that her phone was turned off the night she went missing. The flyers included a description of Sydney and highlighted her notable features, such as several tattoos, one on her arm that says, "Everything will be great someday," yin yang symbol beneath her elbow, and the word "believe" on her wrist. Anyone who has information about Sydney's location is encouraged to contact the police by phone. A massive search for Sydney was launched. Billboards were placed on freeways with her picture. A manhunt was also broadcast on television news. Sydney's mother, Susie, continued to assert that something had happened to her daughter after that date. To support her this thing, she shared a screenshot of a Snapchat post from Sydney that included her picture and the caption, "Ready for date." Sydney's friends also confirmed that she was going on a date with a woman named Audrey, whom she had met through Tinder. During the investigation, police examined Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace. They quickly identified a person of interest. The last time Sydney's phone was used, it connected to a cell tower in the Wilbur neighborhood, likely close to Audrey's home. However, the police did not know who Audrey was. They started looking for a woman named Audrey, the last individual to see Sydney alive, but they faced challenges in locating her because no one knew her real name. Sydney's friend Brooklyn stepped in to help the police by searching for Audrey on Tinder. After downloading the app, she located Audrey and they exchanged phone numbers. This led the police to discover that Audrey's real name was 26-year-old Bailey Boswell. They also found out that Bailey lived near the cell tower where Sydney's phone was last connected. Additionally, it was revealed that Bailey shared her apartment with her partner, 52-year-old Aubrey Trail. Bailey and Aubrey are two individuals with contrasting backgrounds. Bailey Boswell was raised in a typical family in Lyons, Iowa. As a child, she was sociable and performed well academically, also finding success in basketball and running. However, after the death of her father, her life took a different turn. Following her high school graduation, Bailey fell into a troubling lifestyle that involved alcohol and drugs. It was during this time that she met Aubrey on a dating website. Aubrey Trail had a problematic history, facing several fraud charges, including writing bad checks and theft. He established a cult where he referred to himself as Vampire Daddy and paid women $200 a week to adhere to his strange rules. When Sydney disappeared, Aubrey and Bailey were court-ordered to pay over $40,000 due to their fraud cases, and they had multiple misdemeanors. Despite this, the couple was able to evade the authorities. On November 19, 2017, after a warrant was issued, police conducted a search of Bailey in Aubrey's home. During the search, they found that some walls had been scrubbed with bleach. A neighbor confirmed this, stating they had noticed a strong smell of bleach 2 days earlier. After that, the police made more efforts to find the suspects. While evading capture, Bailey and Aubrey posted videos on Facebook denying any involvement in Sydney's disappearance and expressing their hope for her safe return. Bailey mentioned that she had gone on 2 dates with Sydney but had dropped her off at a friend's house, after which she never heard from Sydney again. Bailey added that she just wanted Sydney's family to know that she was really sorry, but she had nothing to do with it. She hoped that Sydney would be found very soon, as Sydney was a lovely, amazing girl. After several days, the police tracked down Bailey Boswell and Aubrey Trail at a hotel in Branson, Missouri. They were arrested weeks after Sydney was reported missing. Through a detailed analysis of phone records and Bailey's location history, investigators found Sydney's remains, which had been dismembered into 14 pieces. 13 of these body parts were discovered in black plastic garbage bags in ditches in Clay County, with some of her part, such as her heart, missing. The situation was horrific. In total, 16 crime scenes were connected to Sydney's remains or her personal belongings, including her car keys, driver's license, and phone case, which were found along the highway. These locations were consistent with the suspects' movements, Bailey and Aubrey. Forensic experts performed autopsies on the 13 body parts that were found. They found abrasions on Sydney's wrists, a bump on her head, torn earlobes, and various bruises, contusions on her back. These injuries suggested that Sydney had struggled to defend herself. The tragic finding devastated not only Sydney's family and friends but also the entire community of Nebraska. On December 11, 2017, the Luft family held a private funeral for Sydney at her lifelong Lutheran church. Bailey and Aubrey faced charges of first-degree murder, improper disposal of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Bailey pleaded not guilty to all charges, while Aubrey pleaded not guilty to felony murder and conspiracy but admitted guilt regarding the improper disposal of human remains. Aubrey's testimonies were inconsistent. Each time he spoke, he appeared increasingly confused, altering his statements and introducing new elements and characters into the story. After his arrest, Aubrey spoke to the police about the cult that he and Bailey belonged to. He discussed witchcraft and claimed that he was a vampire capable of flying. Aubrey presented himself as the cult leader and insisted that there were witches in the group who needed to kill another woman to gain powers. During one of Aubrey's early court hearings, he confessed to killing Sydney but insisted it was an accident. Aubrey explained that he paid Sydney $5,000 to fulfill a fantasy with 2 other women. Sydney agreed to this, but she tragically died during the encounter when he accidentally strangled her with a cord. Aubrey admitted to dismembering the body Sydney as part of a ritual tied to his religious beliefs. He said he needed to drain her blood to free her soul for the gods in a sacred location and arranged her body parts to aid in her reincarnation. However, this account was proven to be false. Surveillance footage from November 14 captured Bailey and Aubrey checking into a hotel in Lincoln, close to Sydney's residence. The following day, November 15, they went to a home improvement store, where they were seen purchasing a disturbing selection of tools: a hacksaw, bleach, a folding saw, a utility knife, and bags intended for Sydney's remains. On November 15 at 12:01 p.m., a surveillance camera recorded Sydney and Aubrey crossing paths at the Menards store during business hours. At that moment, Sydney did not know who Aubrey was or how their lives would become intertwined in a tragic way. On June 11, 2018, the first court hearing took place regarding the murder and improper burial of Sydney's remains. The court ordered separate trials for the defendants, Bailey and Aubrey, although the charges against them were essentially the same. The trials were held in Lexington because the attorneys argued that Bailey and Aubrey would not receive a fair trial in Wilbur due to the extensive media coverage of the case. The prosecution argued that Sydney was murdered through strangulation in a premeditated attack. Aubrey and Bailey were identified as the leaders of a group that recruited young women into intimate activities. To find these women, Bailey used Tinder. During the trial, the jury heard from 3 other women who had previously been in relationships with Aubrey and Bailey, and they shared that they also met these men on Tinder. All of these women had been involved with Bailey and had engaged in intimate activities with both Bailey and Aubrey. One woman testified that she traveled with Aubrey and was given a weekly allowance of $200. She claimed he invited her to join his cult, which he referred to as involving witches. To join, he told her she would need to torture and kill someone. She also mentioned that Bailey was called the Witch Queen. Another woman added that Bailey often talked about breaking her fingers and expressed a desire to dismember bodies. All 3 women emphasized that both Bailey and Aubrey actively participated in these discussions about torture and criminal acts. It is surprising that in today's world, some people still believe in the terrifying concept of exorcism and try to persuade others of its validity. The prosecution reviewed the investigation and the evidence gathered to piece together what happened on the tragic evening of November 15, 2017. Sydney was preparing for a date with a woman she had recently met through Tinder. Bailey picked Sydney up from her apartment, and they started driving in Bailey's car. Eventually, they arrived at Bailey's house, where Sydney was drawn into the apartment. As soon as she entered, Bailey and Aubrey attacked her and strangled her with an extension cord on the living room floor. Bailey and Aubrey then cleaned the apartment thoroughly, an action the prosecution claimed was planned in advance. They subsequently dismembered Sydney and disposed of her remains in Clay County. The next day, on November 16, the court heard from their landlord, Jennifer Cull. She testified that when she drove into the garage, she noticed a strong smell of chlorine, which became more intense when she entered the house. The medical examiner concluded that Sydney's death was a homicide caused by asphyxiation. Toxicology reports revealed that Sydney had antidepressants in her system. The court discovered that, in addition to the missing parts, Sydney's upper left arm, specifically the section above the elbow and below the shoulder, was also unaccounted for. Prosecutors have recommended the death penalty for the 2 suspects. They have also said they will review the case if the verdict is deemed unfair. Meanwhile, Aubrey again denied any involvement in occult activities and only admitted to improperly burying the remains. During his trial, he exclaimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death, shouting, "Bailey is innocent, damn you all." Then, he attempted to end his life by slashing his throat 3 times with a razor blade. However, he survived and was placed in custody until he fully recovered. Aubrey did not attend court for several weeks after that. The next time he appeared was during the defense phase, specifically when he was scheduled to testify. When he entered the courtroom, he smirked and told the judge, "He will be good." It's uncommon for defendants to testify in their own trials, as defense attorneys often advise against it. This is because testifying can lead to complications during cross-examination. Some defendants may reveal too much information, struggle to answer questions clearly, or become confrontational with attorneys, which can negatively influence jurors. However, in Aubrey's case, his situation was different since he had many interactions with the police following his arrest. Aubrey had initially shared his account of incident with the police, but during the trial, he wanted to change his story. He chose to skip most of the trial and only attended the final hearing, where his noticeable scars were evident. When he testified in his defense, Aubrey shocked his attorneys by admitting that he had previously lied to both the authorities and his legal team regarding the death of Sydney. In his testimony, he confessed that he met Sydney in March 2017 and paid her to take part in his illegal activities because she was in need of money. He claimed they lost contact, but in November 2017, he reached out to Sydney again. She needed money, and Aubrey explained that this was the reason he was at Menards that day. On November 15th, Aubrey offered to pay Sydney $55,000 to she join his antiques gang. Later that night, Aubrey, Bailey, and Sydney became intimate, but unfortunately, Sydney accidentally choked to death due to an extension cord used during their activities. Aubrey stated that he didn't know if Sydney had a seizure or something. But that was when she stopped breathing. In court, he clarified that there was no ritual involved in dismembering Sydney's body and that claims about witches, vampires, and blood-sucking were false. Aubrey admitted that he had only dismembered Sydney because he couldn't fit her body in the car. Aubrey stated that he panicked and discarded Sydney's body in a field in Clay County at dawn on November 16th. When questioned about why he didn't seek help if Sydney's death was accidental, he claimed that no one would believe him. Aubrey confessed to disposing of Sydney's body but insisted that her death was accidental, occurring while they were playing with an extension cord. During Bailey's trial, she did not admit to any wrongdoing. In fact, her lawyers argued that she was also a victim of Aubrey. Her attorney told the court that when she met Aubrey, she was a vulnerable young woman, living alone and working as a waitress in Princeton, Missouri. The defense claimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death or the handling of her remains. But this turned out to be untrue. Bailey's cell phone, which she used to access her Tinder account, was located near where Sydney's body parts were discovered. Through a thorough examination of Bailey's phone and location data, police were able to locate all of Sydney's remains. The court also found out that Bailey was the one who reached out to Sydney and set up a meeting. Bailey drove to Sydney's to pick her up on the evening of November 15th. The prosecution informed the court that Bailey found pleasure in discussing cruelty and enjoyed conversations about torture with Aubrey. Evidence presented during the trial indicated that a crime had been planned. On the day of Sydney's murder, Aubrey and Bailey were together at a store, where they purchased tools such as a hacksaw, scissors, and a box cutter from Home Depot. Around noon that day, Bailey sent Sydney a text asking how her day was going. Phone records and surveillance footage confirmed that Bailey was in the Menards parking lot with Aubrey when she sent this message on Tinder. Despite working at Menards, but it seems that Sydney did not realize Bailey was there. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney a message on Tinder, said that her was at her apartment and would pick Sydney up soon. However, phone records reveal that instead of going on a date, they went to the apartment where Bailey and Aubrey lived. Bailey's attorney, Todd Lancaster, argued that the evidence indicated Bailey had bought bleach in garbage bags for the purpose of disposing of Sydney's body. This could result in charges of aiding and abetting the improper disposal of human remains. On November 8, 2021, Bailey Boswell was sentenced to life in prison. The Love family has been searching for justice for 3 years, grieving the loss of their beloved daughter, Sydney. They hoped for a judgment that would bring them some peace. On July 11, 2019, a jury took less than 3 hours to find Aubrey Trail guilty of planning a murder and improperly disposing of human remains. The 3 judges described his actions as cold and calculated. In the second part of the trial, which determined his punishment, the county prosecutors fulfilled their commitment and secured the death penalty for Aubrey Trail. Consequently, he was executed by lethal injection on June 9, 2021. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Inman family. William Inman and Sandra's story began in 1983 when they met at church. He was 18 and she was 16. With their parents' approval, they quickly got married and moved to Logan, Ohio. William was a devoted religious man who worked as a builder. In his free time, he volunteered at the Evangelical Church of the Tabernacle of Faith near Nelson Villa, where he played musical instruments. Meanwhile, Sandra, as a housewife, supported her husband's spiritual activities. In 1984, the couple had their first child, a son named William Jr. To prevent any confusion, the church community referred to the father as Bill and the son as Will. Over the years, Will grew up. In 2001, at the age of 17, he met 15-year-old Summer Cook at a church service. Their meeting was strikingly similar to the love story of Bill and Sandra. The young couple dated for 3 years, and in 2004, after Summer turned 18, they got married. They quickly settled into Will's parents' large house in Logan. In the same year, 39-year-old Bill Inman declared himself a spiritual leader and turned his garage into a temporary church, where he started holding services. Although local residents were initially skeptical of him as a self-proclaimed pastor, his church began to gather followers. It started with neighbors and gradually expanded to their acquaintances. People were drawn there to pray, seek comfort, and make donations. In 2005, Will and Summer joyfully welcomed a son named Alex. However, they soon encountered financial challenges. Will's work at the church did not provide enough income, so the family chose to seek better opportunities in another state. In 2006, the Inman family relocated to Florida. They soon found jobs in the construction industry, building hotels in their new location. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer looked after their home and raised little Alex. After 2 years, however, they missed their hometown and decided to return to Ohio. Unfortunately, they had lost the right to repurchase their previous house in Logan while they were away, so they had to rent a different place in rural Vinton. In 2008, shortly after returning, Will and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kale. 2 years later, they had their third child, another daughter named Alana. Despite the difficulties of raising young children, Will and Summer made an effort to carve out time for themselves. Almost every weekend, they entrusted their kids to Bill and Sandra, who happily embraced their roles as grandparents. For this elderly couple, their grandchildren brought immense joy and purpose to their lives. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman was officially appointed as a pastor of the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable organization named Ranch of Mercy, which was created to assist those in need, particularly people who had lost their jobs or homes. Bill had a vision of constructing a large shelter for orphans and widows, intending to build it himself. Unfortunately, he faced challenges due to insufficient funding to make this dream a reality. Bill proposed holding a lottery to raise funds. He planned to sell tickets for $10 each to reach his financial goal. The winner will receive either a new house or $200,000. Bill also promised to give away 99 other valuable prizes in a raffle. Information about the lottery was shared through local media and advertising. Bill went door to door, encouraging people to support the cause by buying tickets, assuring them that the money raised would be used to build a shelter for those in need. In total, Inman sold 100,000 tickets and raised $1 million. The prize draw is set for September 2010. While Bill was busy with charity work, issues were developing in the Inman family. In June 2010, Summer informed her husband that she wanted a divorce after 6 years of marriage. Before this conversation, she had written a painful entry in her diary, expressing that she was very tired of trying to please everyone and felt exhausted. She questioned whether she deserved happiness and if she had the right to fall in love again and feel loved in return. She acknowledged that it might not be the best time, but she felt the need to tell Will the truth, believing he deserved to know that she did not want to be with him anymore. She mentioned that she needed time alone to figure out who she really was, as she felt like she was just following orders at that moment. Summer emphasized her love for her children, stating that she wouldn't trade them for the world, but she did not want them to see their mother merely obeying someone else. She expressed uncertainty about how Will would react, fearing that he might get angry, try to take the kids, or even threaten her. She believed they should share equal time with the children, but she knew his parents would oppose this and try to persuade her to stay, although she realized that wouldn't change anything. She also recounted that yesterday, Will had asked her what she wanted, but she couldn't answer because all she knew was what she didn't want, to be unhappy and feel trapped. Yet, she remained silent every day, saying that all she could do was cry and sleep. She admitted that she just didn't know how to escape the situation and make everything right, hoping that when she wrote again, she would have found the answer. Summer filed for divorce and moved out of the Inman's house with the children and essential belongings to her parents' home. She wanted to ensure that Alex, Cale, and Alana could still communicate with their father, so she allowed them to visit Will and his parents. 2 months after leaving her husband, Summer began a relationship with Adam Peters. At the same time, she took a job as a cleaner at a bank in downtown Logan, as she had no formal education and struggled to find other employment. Meanwhile, September and October passed, but the drawing that Bill from Ranch of Mercy had promised never took place. It also became clear that construction on the prize house hadn't even started, and the Bill family was slow to refund people's money for the tickets. In early December 2010, the Inmans received notice that they needed to leave their rented home due to unpaid debts. After this news, Summer, accompanied by Adam, went to collect their belongings. However, Will and his parents refused to let her in. Summer called the police, claiming that Will was threatening her and wouldn't return her personal items. When officers arrived, Will continued to deny entry. He threatened to shoot Adam, and even got into a confrontation with a police officer. In her statement, Summer explained that before their wedding, she and Will appeared to have a perfect relationship, but everything changed after they married. Will became controlling and jealous, making unfounded accusations. He dictated her actions and invaded her privacy, affecting her eating habits, household responsibilities, and even their sexual relationship. Summer was so restricted that she couldn't sleep without his permission. He essentially kept her confined to the house and took away her phone and keys. She revealed that Will had always wanted to have 12 children with her and had even considered marrying a second wife. He frequently visited websites for polygamous families, where he shared explicit photos. Will also threatened to kill Summer if she tried to leave him. At one point, he took her cherished cats, drove them far away, and then lied, saying they had escaped through an open window, laughing and claiming she would never see them again. After Summer accused him of wrongdoing, Will attempted to defend his actions by saying he took her phone and keys because he thought she was being unfaithful. Regarding the cats, he claimed he took them to a shelter because they were scratching the furniture and being aggressive to family members. Eventually, Will was ordered to stay away from Summer, and he received a fine and probation for his actions. A custody battle began between the two families. The Inmans reported to the police that Adam Peters posed a danger to Alex, Kaylee, and Alana. A frightening incident occurred late on the night of March 22, 2011. 25-year-old Summer was finishing her shift at the bank. As usual, she cleaned up her workspace and went outside around 11 p.m. to take out the trash. Before leaving, Summer had sent a message to Adam, whom she was supposed to meet after work, but he never saw her again. Concerned, Adam went to the bank after midnight. He couldn't find Summer, but near the trash can he discovered her belongings, her phone, keys, and a running music player with headphones on. A little further away, he found her jacket in the bushes. Adam called the police and notified Summer's parents about her disappearance. Initially, the family thought that she might have been late from work or misplaced her belongings. However, the bank security service informed them that she hadn't been seen since her shift ended. When the police arrived, several witnesses were already present. Two women jogging nearby reported that they had seen Summer being kidnapped about an hour earlier. They explained that as Summer approached a dumpster, a Ford Crown Victoria, driven by a blonde woman, pulled up. Two men wearing black balaclavas exited the vehicle, grabbed Summer, and forced her into the back seat. Despite her attempts to resist, scream, and plead for help, one of the witnesses who tried to intervene was met with pepper spray from the female driver. The kidnappers then drove away with Summer. The two women rushed to the nearest police station to report the incident, but for some reason, law enforcement was skeptical and even suspicious of their account, suspecting they might have fabricated the story for amusement. A whole hour had passed after Summer's parents called the police before they finally arrived at the crime scene. Unfortunately, by that time, it was too late for them to find Summer while the trail was still fresh. News of the abduction of 25-year-old Summer Inman quickly spread through local media. Hundreds of residents of Logan joined the search effort, but as days went by, hope of finding her alive began to fade. Summer's parents struggled to keep their thoughts away from the worst possible outcome. A few weeks prior to the tragedy, Summer had posted a picture on Facebook with Adam and the children, depicting what appeared to be a happy family. This photo infuriated Will Inman, Summer's husband. It had been revealed that Summer met Adam before deciding to divorce Will. In the spring of 2010, Adam started working for the Inmans, maintaining their house and yard, and he soon developed feelings for Summer. Initially, she rejected his advances, but eventually, she gave in. In her diary, she reflected on that moment, expressing that when their eyes met, she realized she had let the devil take hold of her and ignored the warnings from God. She mentioned that she tried to walk away, with her mind screaming to run, but she stayed and allowed Adam to embrace her, expressing her regret and guilt. Meeting Adam marked the beginning of the end for Summer and Will's marriage, as she realized that she wanted to pursue happiness, love, and to be loved, which ultimately led her to file for divorce. 5 days before Summer disappeared, Will attempted to challenge the alimony payments in court. He wanted to reduce the amount he had to pay his ex-wife from $150 per child each month to $50, as his annual income was only $6,500. Will, along with his parents, sought sole custody of the children, but the judge denied their request. Bill and Sandra deeply missed their grandchildren, who were the center of their lives. Since separating from Summer, the elderly couple had visibly lost weight and appeared weary. In March 2011, shortly after Summer went missing, the police found the Inman family, Bill, Sandra, and Will, were hiding in Bill's mother's house in Jackson County, Ohio. During questioning, all three of them consistently denied any involvement in Summer's disappearance. They explained that on the night she vanished, they had traveled to Cleveland to look at a new house. However, their car broke down, and they spent the entire night trying to fix it on the side of the road. They returned home to Logan the following morning. The Inman stated that they had always treated Summer well and rarely had conflicts with her. However, they noted that after Adam Peters came into their lives, things took a turn for the worse. Bill, Sandra, and Will described Adam as a negative influence who had ruined their previously happy family. The police took an interest in a white Ford Crown Victoria that was parked near the Inman's house. They seized the car's GPS navigator and examined its route. They discovered that on the afternoon of March 22nd, when the kidnapping took place, the car was in Logan. The GPS was turned off at 5:30 p.m. that evening and only activated again the following morning, March 23rd, still in Logan. There was no evidence that the Inman family ever came to Cleveland. Additionally, phone records indicated that the suspects remained in Logan throughout the night from March 22nd to March 23rd. On the morning of March 23rd at 7:30 a.m., Bill, Sandra, and Will were seen at a car wash, where they had the car thoroughly cleaned inside. Summer was not with them. Afterward, the Inmans traveled to Cleveland, where they changed the tires at an auto repair shop. The mechanic found it unusual that Bill chose to replace nearly new tires with older ones. Additionally, the Inmans attempted to alter the car's appearance, and Bill removed a spotlight that he had previously installed near the side mirror. After the arrest, Bill attempted to reassure his elderly mother that they were innocent and that the trials they faced were a form of divine punishment. However, after several hours of intense questioning and realizing that all three could face the death penalty, Sandra eventually broke down. She confessed that they were responsible for the kidnapping of Summer on that tragic night. The men wearing balaclavas were identified as her husband, Bill, and her son, Will. Sandra explained that the abduction was entirely her idea. She intended to scare her daughter-in-law into allowing Will to see their children, but things quickly spiraled out of control. She stated that Will would admit to guilt for both murder and kidnapping. Sandra acknowledged that it was her idea to take Summer, explaining that she believed this would frighten her. Will tied Summer's hands, feet, and neck with plastic ties. Summer struggled and screamed, but then suddenly lost consciousness. Upon noticing that she was unresponsive, Will panicked and wanted to cut her free. He called out to his mother, asking where the knife was because he couldn't find it. As the family desperately searched for the knife, precious minutes passed. It was too late, and Summer had suffocated. Sandra insisted that they never intended to harm their daughter-in-law. Their goal was simply to scare her in order to resolve a custody dispute over the grandchildren so they could see them on weekends. On March 29, 2011, 1 week after the abduction, Sandra revealed the location where they had hidden the body. Summer was placed in an abandoned well on the property of the church that the Inman family attended, known as the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith, which is situated near Nelsonville, 30 kilometers from the bank where Summer worked. Bill Inman had previously helped build this church, and 28 years ago, he and Sandra got married there under its arches. When the police removed the concrete lid from the well, they discovered a disturbing scene. Summer was at the bottom, her body positioned head first. She was dressed in the same outfit she had worn on her last day, a black t-shirt that read, "I don't have an anger problem, I have an idiot problem." The autopsy revealed that Summer had died from strangulation. Besides the marks left by plastic ties on her neck, wrists, and ankles, there were no other injuries on her body. Sandra originally intended to dispose of the body in the river. However, she later thought the church well would be a safer place where it wouldn't be discovered. She confessed to her crime and showed genuine remorse for her actions. The trial soon followed. Bill, 49, and Will, 28, both pleaded not guilty to Summer's murder. Throughout the hearings, they spoke very little and avoided making eye contact with her parents. In contrast, Sandra took full responsibility for the crime, reiterating that the abduction was her idea. As she delivered her final statement, the woman tearfully pleaded for forgiveness from Summer's parents. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sandra clearly expressed her deep regret for the tragic events. "Summer was like a daughter to me," she cried. "If I could turn back time, I would never have made this terrible choice." In 2012, the court sentenced Bill and Will Inman to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sandra received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 15 years. The church friends and parishioners all agreed that Bill was the one controlling everything in the Inman family. He made all the decisions. No one thought that the idea of the kidnapping came from Sandra. It was well known that Will had been spoiled as a child, with his parents giving in to his every demand. Sandra realized that both her husband and son were as guilty as she was, but she continued to plead guilty, hoping that it would lessen the consequences for them. Alex, Cale, and Alana were cared for by the parents of Summer, who had passed away, for an extended period. They struggled to explain to their grandchildren the absence of their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather. The tragic story of the Inman family highlights how concealed anger, jealousy, and a need to control others can result in devastating outcomes. Bill and Sandra, who appeared to embody piety and strong family values to everyone, revealed themselves to be oppressive figures to their daughter-in-law. Summer found herself trapped in a toxic relationship that stifled her will and desires. Her efforts to escape ultimately cost her life. Will, who was raised in this oppressive environment, became selfish and resistant to compromise. His obsession with reclaiming his wife and children at any price ultimately led to his downfall. The terrible crime committed by the Inman's family shattered multiple families, leaving 3 young children without their mother and a grandfather and grandmother without their beloved family member. This story highlights the importance of letting go of grudges, respecting others' boundaries, and building relationships based on trust and respect. Holding on to anger can eventually lead to outbursts that damage the most valuable aspects of our lives. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Diogo Goncalves. Albufeira, a beautiful resort town, is one of the most visited places in the Algarve region of southern Portugal. It was there, in 1999, that Diogo was born. He is the only child of a poor but hard-working family whose income mainly depended on the of tourism. Diogo's parents saw him as a good son, and those who knew him described him as decent, responsible, hardworking, and reliable. He was also a very outgoing young man who loved being surrounded by friends and family. Diogo went to high school in his hometown. After graduating, he started studying computer science. To fund his education and support his family, he got a job at McDonald's in 2015 when he was just 16. At 17, while still working there, his life became miserable when his father suffered a stroke and fell into a vegetative state, as reported by the media. That same year, while Diogo and his mother were dealing with his father's health crisis, another tragedy struck. His mother, who had always supported his learning and growth, was hit by a car on her way to work at the mall, where she cleaned. The car dragged her several meters, leading to her falling into a ditch where she died from her injuries. Although the driver fled, but the police identified him and he faced trial. While he was waiting for the conviction of the person responsible for his parents' suffering, Diogo needed to be transferred to a medical unit where he received the necessary care. His maternal aunt, worried about his situation, had suggested that he move in with her. However, they had a serious disagreement, and after a few weeks, it became impossible for them to continue living together. Diogo explained what was happening to his friend, who offered him a room in his house in the Aldea neighborhood, also in Albufeira. At the time, the closeness to the friend's relatives helped Diogo feel at home. Despite his young age, Diogo demonstrated great ability to handle and overcome difficult situations with patience and optimism. In 2017, at just 18 years old, Diogo graduated with a degree in computer technology and completed a 6-month internship at Vila Vida Park, a leading 5-star hotel. His impressive work led the executives to offer him a position as a technician. In 2018, Diogo accepted the offer and left his job at a fast food restaurant chain, where he had worked for nearly a year and had become a duty manager. This thing a new chapter in his life, filled with opportunities to advance after overcoming difficult times. After working at the company for some time and anticipating better days ahead, he decided to buy a car. Diogo got along well with his co-workers, especially Maria Malvero, a 19-year-old security guard at the hotel. Maria, like Diogo, comes from a family with difficult circumstances and faces her own challenges. Her mother had mental health issues, and her father left when she was very young. She never spoke to him again. Maria, interested in martial arts, practiced karate and aspired to be a police officer. However, her application to the police academy was rejected due to her tattoo. Disappointed, she decided to study at Securinfo, a company that trains security guards in various private security fields. Diogo was interested in Maria and made his feelings known from the start, but she did not feel the same way and treated him coldly. Fabio Acosta, a close friend of Diogo, said that Diogo was deeply in love with Maria. He was so infatuated that he declined a well-paying job offer from the Sheraton hotel chain in Lisbon because he didn't want to be away from her. Additionally, he would bring her meals when she was working. Over time, they became very close, and people around them assumed they were a couple. However, there was no romantic relationship between them. Maria told Diogo she didn't want anything to do with him because she had just ended a toxic relationship with a naval officer, yet she was still giving him false hopes. Diogo never gave up hope for a future with Maria and sought opportunities to be near her and make her happy in various ways. One day, he was deeply disappointed when he saw a video on social media of Maria kissing another girl. Diogo was upset because he believed she should have told him that she wasn't interested in men and that this was why they could never be together. Fabio, Diogo's best friend, tried to reassure him by saying that girls often do this, but Diogo was not convinced. He insisted that she had lied to him and that was why she had rejected him. Despite the disappointment, Diogo and Maria stayed friends, and she continued to accept his gifts and invitations for dates. Several times, Diogo offered to walk her home, but she always said her roommate had a jealous boyfriend and she didn't want to bring another man into the apartment. As time went on, in December 2019, Diogo learned that he would finally receive compensation for his mother's death, which had occurred 3 years earlier. After receiving the payment amount of up to 70,000 euros, Diogo decided it was time to buy a house to avoid continuing to pay rent. He shared the good news with his friend Maria, who left her job at the hotel a few weeks later. Maria stated that she could no longer stand the colleagues' comments about the relationship between her and Diogo. She also explained that she wanted to spend more time with her mother, who needed a lot of attention due to a mental illness. At that moment, there was no reason to doubt her words. However, subsequent incidents suggest that her decision to leave the hotel was motivated by dark reasons, and this is where the third character in the story, Mariana Fonseca, 20 years old, comes in. Mariana worked as a nurse at the hospital and had a dear relationship with Maria. They both lived together in Mariana's parents' house, because they still do not have enough money to have their own home where they could enjoy their relationship. When Maria discovered the substantial amount of money Diogo, she started getting closer to he. It seems Maria shared this information with Mariana, and they decide to trick Diogo in order to gain access to his bank account and steal the compensation money. After Maria repeatedly refused to date Diogo, one day, she told him she wanted to spend a romantic evening with him. This was a significant surprise for Diogo, who was overjoyed and couldn't believe his luck. After waiting for so long, he was ecstatic about finally being with the girl he loved. They planned the meeting for Friday evening, March 20th, 2020. Diogo was thrilled and didn't question why Maria had suddenly changed her mind. Maria and Mariana had different accounts of the incident that day, but here are the facts according to media reports based on official information. When Diogo entered, Maria offered him some orange juice she had brought. However, the drink contained an unexpected ingredient, diindolomethane, DIM, a drug affecting the central nervous system, with analgesic and sedative properties. Maria using the drug, which she had stolen from the hospital. Her plan was to sedate Diogo, access his banking information, and manipulate his fingers to unlock his phone. Mariana waited in a car outside while Maria executed the plan. Mariana even texted she several times to check if the drug had taken effect, as it was taking longer than expected. The situation inside the house became increasingly more tense. Diogo didn't understand what was happening and started to feel anxious. Maria then tries to calm him down by promising to show him an erotic dance, but first she has to tie him to a table. After being restrained for a few minutes, Diogo panicked and asked Maria to release him, but she became aggressive, leading to a struggle. Using her martial arts skills, she subdued Diogo by knocking him to the floor and choking him, prevent him from breathing. According to Mariana's testimony, Maria later instructed her to enter the apartment. Upon entering, Mariana found Diogo on the floor. She questioned Maria about the incident and criticized her for going beyond their plans, which was to steal his keys and take his money. Seeing Diogo unresponsive, Mariana began resuscitation efforts. When he woke up, he was extremely agitated and attempted to attack she. It seems he realized that Mariana was plotting against him, led him to try to defend himself. In response to Diogo's aggression towards Mariana, Maria intervened by grabbing him from behind, bringing him to the ground, and restraining him by squeezing his neck again. Diogo's life ended tragically at the hands of the girl he loved, Maria. His body was found in the living room of Maria and Mariana's house, where they continued with their planned robbery. They first severed his thumb and index finger to unlock his phone, access a mobile payment app, and transfer money. This process took several days because there was a limit on the amount that could be transferred each day. When he learned that Diogo had work scheduled the next day, Mariana and Maria tried to prevent his colleagues from noticing his absence, searching for him, and reporting him missing. One of Diogo's colleagues received a text from his number stating that he couldn't make it to work that day and needed someone to cover for him. Diogo's colleague, who disliked last-minute shift changes, found the request odd. Diogo asked if everything was okay and received a simple yes in response. The conversation among Diogo's co-worker and others continued throughout Friday and part of Saturday, but the unusual messages increasingly seemed uncharacteristic of him. One person receiving these messages was Diogo's supervisor. One message said that Diogo wouldn't be returning to work because he had met a woman in France and planned to move in with her. This explanation seemed odd to the supervisor because Diogo was a responsible employee and wouldn't leave his job so abruptly. To find the answer, the supervisor attempted to call Diogo but received no answer. Later, he got a message stating that Diogo was not in to talk on the phone. The supervisor responded, saying he could only feel reassured if they spoke. He wanted to hear Diogo's voice and wanted to know what was happening. Diogo's loved ones reacted to messages sent by Maria and Mariana, in which they pretended to be Diogo. This prompted they to alter their plan for explaining Diogo's sudden disappearance. They decided to make it appear as if Diogo had ended his life and planned to dismember his body to get rid of the evidence. Maria later mentioned that their actions were inspired by the TV show Dexter, featuring a forensic scientist who killed criminals and disguised his crimes by dismembering their bodies. After executing their horrific plan, Mariana and Maria placed Diogo's body in trash bags in the trunk of their car. They then went to an ATM and shopped at a mall, where they were seen hugging and laughing on security cameras. Following this, they returned to Mariana's home to begin dismembering Diogo's body. Ultimately, they put Diogo's torso in a black bag and discarded the other parts in a container. Meanwhile, Diogo's friends launched a campaign to report him as missing and reached out to the authorities. The authorities then waited the required 48 hours before officially declaring him missing. Mariana and Maria left the house, with Maria getting into Diogo's car to drive to a cliff near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. Mariana followed behind in her own car. Around 2 p.m. that day, Mariana threw Diogo's torso off the cliff and abandoned his car nearby. They planned to make it seem like he had jumped voluntarily. However, instead of falling into the sea, the remains got stuck on a rock. Finally, Mariana and Maria drove together in Mariana's car for about 12 minutes, covering 7 kilometers, to the Inferno Dago waterfall in Tavira, where they disposed of the rest of Diogo's body in the water. Shortly after, Diogo's car was discovered in a parking lot near the Cabo de São Vicente lighthouse. A newspaper report stated that 2 laptops were found inside the car, led forensic police to investigate. A land and sea search was launched, leading to the discovery of a young man's torso partially covered by a black garbage bag. Meanwhile, at another location along the coast, a French couple found the young man's head at Inferno Toigo. Diogo's hands and feet were later recovered during an intensive police search. The investigators assigned to the case found the details surrounding Diogo's death unusual. They noted that he was a quiet man who don't hang out with bad people. As the police continued their investigation, they discovered that Diogo had received a significant payout following his mother's death. While examining money orders, they found that a large sum had been transferred from Diogo's account to someone named Maria. Naturally, the detectives' next move was to locate Maria to understand why she had received money from Diogo. Maria attempted to persuade the police that she killed Diogo in self-defense, claiming he was trying to abuse her. She stated that this was why she had left the hotel prior to the incident. However, a review of the text messages between Diogo and Maria, they showed that her claims were false. After Maria stopped working, she and Diogo grew close. During her initial meeting with the police, Maria insisted that she was entirely responsible for planning and carrying out the incident that led to the shooting. Maria clarified that Mariana was not involved in the crime at all. However, Mariana's account of the incident contradicted what Maria's claimed. Mariana reported that Maria to wanting to steal Diogo's money and intended to kill him. She stated that Maria's plan was to make him suffer in order to extract his bank account password. Investigators gathered enough evidence to convict both girls, Mariana and Maria, including phone records, the Diogo's cell phone, and ATM surveillance footage. Maria and Mariana were arrested on April 1, 2020, and faced court in June of that year. The judge carefully reviewed the incidents that Maria described. Maria remained steadfast in her confession and denied any involvement Mariana's. She stated that Diogo's body was in a suitcase in a car parked in the garage for 2 days, and it was there that the dismemberment took place, while Mariana's family was sleeping. After hearing Maria's detailed testimony about the incidents, the judge repeatedly asked where Mariana was during the dismemberment, as which had been done with surgical precision at the joints. All attention in the courtroom turned to the nurse, Mariana. She anticipated the questions and clarified that, since everyone was aware of her employment at the hospital, they mistakenly thought she was responsible for dismembering the corpse. She said that dismemberment could easily be done by using information on the internet. The judge imposed a detention order on both Mariana and Maria, citing that they had committed a serious crime in a creepy, calculated, reckless, and extremely brutal manner. A few months later, on February 24, 2021, the trial began. During her testimony on February 26, 2021, Maria claimed that she initially wanted revenge on Diogo because he had abused her, but did not intend to kill him. She admitted that her goal was to humiliate him and clarified that Mariana had no relationship with Diogo. Mariana and Maria attended court together but did not make eye contact during the trial. It is rumored that after the arrest and subsequent jail time, they decided to end their friendship. The trial included testimonies from several witnesses, including forensic expert Teresa Costa. She explained that the level of diphenhydramine found in Diogo's blood was much lower than expected from the 3 ampoules, suggesting that he either did not take the prescribed dose or had taken it many hours before his death. On April 27, 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Maria Malvero was convicted of several serious crimes, including aggravated murder, destroy the body, robbery, unauthorized access, fraud, carjacking, and possession of an illegal weapon. As a result, she received a 25-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €265,000 in compensation to Diogo's father. Mariana Fonseca, on the other hand, was acquitted of murder but found guilty of destroy the body, complicity, and fraud. She received a 4-year prison sentence but was released because none of her convictions required pre-trial detention, at least until the final sentencing. The court determined that Mariana's effort to save life Diogo indicated that she did not intend to kill him. The judge based his decision on a confession from she, in which she accepted full responsibility for her actions. However, this verdict was not accepted by the Portuguese public, who viewed Mariana as equally guilty of the serious crime against Diogo alongside Maria. After the verdict, Mariana exited the courtroom through a separate exit where her father, who had attended all the hearings, was waiting. Neither of them spoke to the media. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shurtha and Leon Brits. Our story takes place in a small town called PAF, South Africa, with a population of about 3,000 people. In 1979, Leon Brits was born there. He had a brother named Toki. Their father owned a local hotel and other businesses, providing a comfortable living for the family. Leon was a bright and hard-working student who excelled in school and was active in sports. As a teenager, he started working in the family's hotel, learning to manage the business and assisting his father. Once his brother was old enough, the Leon brothers worked together. The Leon were a close-knit family, respected throughout the area. When Toki turned 18, he left their small town, but Leon remained with his parents. Leon dreamed of taking over the family hotel business, which frequently hosted large events and parties. At one of these events, Leon noticed a stunning girl with chestnut hair and eyes. He couldn't stop looking at her and decided to introduce himself. However, the girl, Shurtha, had just turned 14, although she appeared older, while Leon was already 25. Shurtha was born on September 6, 1990, and was the youngest of 4 siblings. Suritha's family lived in poverty, and their situation became worse when her father died of a poisonous spider bite. Her mother was left to raise 3 children on her own. Shurtha endured hardships with her family for many years. Suritha's family barely had enough money to buy food, making the future of the children very bleak. Then Leon, who came from a wealthy family, met Shurtha and fell in love with her despite their large age gap. Shurtha, a schoolgirl, was also drawn to Leon. They started talking, and Leon pursued her with extravagance, taking her to fancy places and giving her expensive gifts. This left a strong impression on Shurtha, who was extremely grateful to Leon. She realized she could build a future with him without lacking anything. Their relationship blossomed as Shurtha enjoyed Leon's attention, and Leon loved her very much. A few months later, Leon expressed his wish to marry Shurtha, and his mother approved after meeting her. They then began dating officially, and their relationship seemed perfect. However, when Shurtha turned 15, her classmates noticed changes in her behavior. She started wearing loose-fitting clothes, avoided showing her belly, and became very shy, as if she didn't want to be approached. Eventually, Shurtha told Leon that she suspected she might be pregnant. Leon was very upset, as a pregnancy could result in accusations of statutory rape since he was already 26 years old. Leon, who controlled the relationship, had initiated their intimacy. To address Saritha's suspicions, he gave her money to visit the clinic, where the doctor confirmed she was pregnant with twins. When she told Leon the news, he became angry and insisted she not keep the pregnancy, giving her money for an abortion. Despite her hesitation, the pressure from Leon and their age difference compelled her to comply. She went to the clinic alone and followed Leon's demands. Leon wasn't opposed to having a family and children, but he believed everything had its proper time and that they should wait until she was at least an adult. After the procedure, when Shurtha returned from the clinic, her mental health was severely impacted. Leon thought that taking walks would help her recover quickly, not realizing she was in a lot of pain. Her emotional recovery needed more time. Shurtha eventually overcame the trauma, and their romantic relationship continued. Leon still wanted children but asked her to wait. By the end of 2008, Shurtha was in her final year of school, preparing for her exams. At 18, she became pregnant again and told Leon about it. Leon was unhappy once more, but this time, Shurtha refused to have another abortion. She was now old enough to make her own decisions. Shurtha insisted on keeping the child and decided not to follow Leon's wishes. He agreed. She graduated from school in early 2009 while pregnant. Shurtha and Leon decided to get married. Although Leon was uncertain about marriage, they had come too far in their relationship, so they went ahead with the wedding. Shurtha had her first child a year later, twin boys. The couple was very happy. After the twins were born, Leon's father passed away, and his mother began to suffer from age-related problems that made it difficult for her to manage the family business. Leon and his brother decided to put their mother in a nursing home so that she could receive proper care. Leon then took full control of the hotel. During this time, he also owned a mining equipment store and a restaurant, both of which were aimed at serving miners by providing food at their workplaces. He also owned rental properties. These ventures generated a good income for the family, allowing them to live comfortably. Due to his heavy workload, Leon decided to involve his wife in the family business. He didn't pressure her, as she had already wanted to start working in business. Leon entrusted her with managing the equipment store. She began handling supplies while caring for their two young children, which made managing the business challenging. Although she couldn't take on a large workload, she managed to handle her responsibilities effectively. By this time, the children had grown up and started school. In South Africa, getting an education can be a challenge as not every small town has educational facilities and the quality is often subpar. Ensuring the best quality education often requires daily travel between cities. However, Saritha's family rented a house in a nearby major city for the duration of the children's schooling. Leon decided to send the children to Kakumahi with Shurtha. She had to take care of the children herself and give up her business. They only visited Leon on weekends to spend time with him. At first, everything seemed fine, but over time, the distance between the spouses became more apparent. The children couldn't communicate with their father regularly, and Shurtha rarely saw her husband. Their relationship grew much colder than it was at the beginning of their marriage. In 2017, Shurtha began experiencing health issues. She was diagnosed with cancer, heart problems, and arthritis. She underwent surgery to remove the tumor, which saved her life by preventing the disease from progressing. To address her other health issues, Shurtha started traveling to Johannesburg every month to receive special treatments from specialists at a clinic. All of this was funded by Leon, who genuinely wanted to help Shurda and supported her while continuing to manage the business. The biggest challenge during this period was taking care of the children, but the couple solved it by hiring a nanny to help. The family business was very profitable, and Leon's workplace and home were both equipped with safes. Thanks to the extensive business, Leon became wealthy, but at the cost of having to work long hours without days off. In addition, getting rich in a poor country is very dangerous, because he had unintentionally attracted many people who were jealous of his life. Starting in 2017, Leon encountered problems in his business, which led to many people publicly threatening him. At this time, Leon confided in his wife that he felt unsafe and feared for his life. The couple discussed these issues regularly to ease his anxiety, but the situation did not improve. Gradually, the threats became a regular occurrence. Leon began to ignore the threatening messages, as they came almost every day over trivial matters. A few years later, a terrible tragedy occurred on October 7, 2020. After a brief phone call with Shurda, her husband returned home to check on the dogs. He then stopped communicating, which worried Shurda. She decided to go home to check on him. That day, after arriving home and going inside, the house was strangely quiet and empty. Shurda searched every room and finally discovered Leon's body floating in the pool. In shock, she contacted Leon's brother and then called the police to report her husband's death. Leon's brother and the hotel manager were the first to arrive at the scene of the tragedy, followed shortly by the police. It was clear that Leon's death was no accident. He had been brutally beaten before falling into the pool, suggesting that it was likely a targeted killing. Police quickly noticed that apart from a broken safe, no valuables had been stolen, despite the fact that there were plenty of items worth stealing in the house. This seemed unusual, as thieves usually stole anything of value. The case quickly attracted widespread attention and became a major topic in the South African media. Social networks are full of rumors and speculation. Rumor has it that the businessman has many serious enemies and has received threats. Some say that people who had quarrels with Leon may have been involved in the case. The police receive reports from random people every day, and it takes them a long time to process so many false complaints. Initially, Leon's brother Toki was suspected of being the culprit because he was seen at the crime scene shortly before Leon's death. The suspected motive was their mother's will, which was kept in Leon's safe, and Toki wanted to amend the document for fear of losing his inheritance. At the time, their mother was seriously ill and left a will. The police attempted to prove that there had been serious conflicts between them over the matter, but they were unsuccessful. Toki insisted that there had been no conflict, saying that his meetings with Leon were very normal and that they did not usually argue about money. Toki sought comfort from Shurda, who believed he was innocent and promised to find him the best lawyer. The housekeeper knew about the cameras in the house and informed the police, which gave them access to the footage. They also collected recordings from cameras at the entrance to the house. Briso Shurid, the housekeeper, was brought to the station to help identify the people in the footage. But she was unable to recognize anyone. The police had no solid leads. Leon's brother Toki remains a suspect due to a possible inheritance dispute, but without evidence against him, the case has been dropped. A few months later, Jacques van Vuren, 37, contacted the police and told the whole truth about Leon's murder. Because the criminal wanted to confess, in exchange for a lighter sentence, and agreed to expose all his accomplices. It turned out that in the Shurda family, things were not as rosy as they seemed. The couple's distance not only cooled their relationship, but also completely destroyed it. One day, Shurda took her husband's mobile phone and discovered photos of other women. At that time, she herself was unfaithful to Leon. Shurda was beautiful and attracted to many men. At the time of her marriage, she had a brief relationship with a lover. But during her medical treatment in Johannesburg, she developed a more serious relationship. She visited her lover every time she went to the hospital for treatment, during which time their relationship deepened. She considered leaving her husband. This seemed pretty straightforward since they lived in separate homes and rarely communicated. Not long after, she asked her husband for a divorce. It is unclear whether she simply wanted to end her relationship with her husband to be with her lover or whether she intended to marry him. Leon did not know about the betrayal, but he was shocked by his wife's desire for a divorce. At first, he reacted very violently and expressed his grief. Then he calmed down and threatened that if she filed for divorce, he would take everything from her, including money and children. Memories of her poor childhood still haunted her. Due to pressure from her husband, Shurtha had to give up her plans. She no longer loved her husband Leon, but she did not want to lose everything. In desperation, Shurtha turned to her lover, who lived near Johannesburg, to see if he could help her leave her husband. She repeatedly asked him for help, but he refused. He tried to convince her that it was a bad idea. Eventually, she stopped making these requests. One day, Shurtha was talking to her lover. During the conversation, she said that she no longer had to worry about her husband because a classmate was willing to help resolve the situation. At first, her lover took these words as a joke and the couple never brought up the subject again. However, it was not a joke. Shurtha was actually talking to her classmate, Jacques van Vuren. At the time, Jacques was going through a difficult time. He had just divorced and his ex-wife had moved out with the children. He had also been injured at work, forcing him to reduce his hours and income. Despite this, he still had to pay child support, which led to serious financial difficulties. In the face of these difficulties, Jacques relapsed into drug addiction, which drove his wife away from him. Shurtha and Jacques met again by chance at a barbecue, where he confided in her about his troubles. Shurtha decided to take advantage of this opportunity. She had obtained Jacques' phone number. Shurtha contacted Jacques. She said that her husband had been abusing her for years, so she wanted to get away from his control. And Jacques believed her. He was extremely disgusted by Leon's behavior. Shurtha had reached Jacques' limit, as he had had a difficult childhood. He lived with an abusive father who had physically and mentally abused him, leaving him traumatized, and Suritha's story was effective. Finally, he agreed to help Shurtha resolve her situation. She promised to pay 400,000 rand, a large sum that could help Jacques solve all his financial problems. During this time, Leon's business was struggling. His hardware store and restaurant had also closed. The estate was abandoned and did not generate any income. The Leon family had been living off their savings, but with the high costs of maintaining their lifestyle, their financial reserves began to run out. In this context, Leon often quarreled with his wife. Their relationship began to fall apart, which only made the situation worse. Finally, Shurtha decided to get rid of her husband again. She contacted Jacques, who asked for half the money in advance. Shurtha withdrew 70,000 rand and met Jacques to discuss the plan. She promised to give the remaining money through her housekeeper, who worked for Leon and had moved into her house to help with the housework. The next day, she gave Jacques an envelope containing 1,000 rand. With the deposit, Jacques hired his university friend Enrich Williams. Enrich initially refused to participate in the murder, but due to financial difficulties, when Jacques offered him a large sum of money, he could not resist and agreed. Enrich was 34 at the time and worried that he couldn't handle Leon on his own. So he found a place to stay, Amantel Bariki, a recent college graduate. Amantel, just 24, had studied engineering and dreamed of building his own house. Like many others, he was struggling financially. When he was told of the amount of money involved, Amantel agreed to help. Then the plan entered a careful preparation phase. Shurtha filmed a video showing the layout of the house and discussed the attack with the criminals. Shurtha let the criminals into the house so they could hide behind a large sofa in the living room. Her role was to lure her husband into the house while she was receiving treatment in Johannesburg. Jacques was not allowed in the area because witnesses could identify him as a friend of the couple. So Enrich and Amantel had to carry out the attack. Shurtha insisted that the attack looked like a robbery, so she allowed the criminals to take whatever they wanted from the house. She also asked that Suritha's beloved dogs be kept safe. To distract the dogs, they bought a package of sausages. The sausages were scattered around the yard to lure the dogs away. A rehearsal was scheduled for early October, but was cancelled when Leon's brother Toki visited on October 5th and stayed overnight. The attackers had everything ready and planned to burn clothes and any other evidence after the murder to avoid leaving any clues for the police. While waiting for the signal to start, Jacques tried to calm down. He broke his rule of staying away from the area where Leon would be killed by driving past the house several times before returning to wait for the signal to continue. At around 6 a.m. the next day, while Leon was at work, the attackers entered the house and hid behind the sofa. At 10 a.m., Shurtha called Leon to say that, according to the housekeeper, the dogs were missing. Leon needed to go back to look for them, which seemed normal to him, so he returned to the house, unaware that his attackers were waiting inside. As Leon entered the living room and turned around, the attack began. He was stabbed in the back by Amantel with a knife. Despite being caught off guard, Leon fought back. During the struggle, Enrich grabbed a baseball bat and began beating Leon. Leon fell to the ground. He was stabbed 8 times, and then they used a dog collar to strangle him to death before stealing his wallet. They then carried Leon and threw him into the pool. Then went back into the house, opened the safe, and stole money in diamonds. They fled the scene after carrying out their plan. At the time, Shurtha was in Johannesburg for treatment, which gave her an alibi. After learning about the incident, Shurtha returned home, where she discovered her husband's body. Later, when Shurtha was invited to the police station to view the surveillance camera footage, she noticed her old school friend Jacques in the video. Although his face was not visible, the footage captured his car driving suspiciously past their house twice. Shurtha did not claim to recognize the car, but the police took notice of it, although the license plate was unclear. While the investigation was ongoing, Shurtha used a disposable phone to avoid detection and keep their conversations from being monitored. It turned out that Shurtha had provided the police with information regarding Toki and tried to blame him for her husband's death. Shurtha had gone to great lengths to play the role of a grieving widow. Even after the funeral, Toki remained unsuspecting and continued to contact Shurtha, supporting her during this difficult time. During this time, Toki began to notice significant changes in Suritha's behavior. She no longer appeared to be a grieving widow. In fact, she had gotten a tattoo, despite Leon's constant objection to her getting one. In addition, Shurtha began riding a motorcycle, which Leon was also adamantly against. She began wearing more revealing, provocative clothing, along with heavy, aggressive makeup, which had always annoyed Leon when he was alive. Despite all these changes, Toki remains unaware of Suritha's involvement in the crime. During this time, Shurtha suffered financial hardship as her family assets were frozen due to the ongoing investigation. She was unable to pay the remaining 200,000 rand to the killers and had no personal savings. The killers became angry and began to threaten her. Jacques regularly contacted her to demand money, but Shurtha continued to delay payment by insisting that the assets were still frozen. The situation became so bad that she hired a bodyguard to move into her home. The bodyguard began helping to look after the children, leading neighbors to assume that he was her new partner. Jacques also received threats from Enrich and Amantel, the killers. as he was responsible for paying the remaining amount to them, but he could not do so without money from Schurter. On one occasion, Jacques went to visit his sister and received several threats along the way, which made him fearful. Under emotional pressure, he confessed to his sister about the murder, and she informed their mother. His sister then tried to convince him to go to the police and confess, and he finally agreed. This led to the full truth about the murder being revealed. When the police arrived at Sarita's house, she said that she was upset because Leon did not approve her divorce and refused to pay for her medical treatment. However, there was no evidence in their correspondence to substantiate her claims. The possible motive for her decision to kill her husband was that he was planning to sell the dilapidated hotel. She, who had become accustomed to a lavish lifestyle, did not want to sell it. Meanwhile, Leon's main goal in selling the hotel was to pay off his debts and spend more time with his family. He had neglected his children and wife, so he planned to retire and pursue a quieter, more settled life with them. Unfortunately, this decision eventually led to his death. Jacques Van Vuren was sentenced to 25 years in prison, eligible for parole in up to 5 years, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. In exchange for his cooperation, he agreed to testify against others involved in the massacre. Rich Williams and Amantal Bariki were also arrested and sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Leon Britz. On March 19, 2021, police arrested Schurter Britz. She quickly pleaded guilty to murder and armed robbery. As a result, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder and 15 years in prison for armed robbery, both sentences to run concurrently. Because she pleaded guilty, she will have the opportunity to be paroled with minimal restrictions. Throughout the trial, Schurter portrayed herself as the victim in her relationship with Leon, which began when she was 14 years old. He pressured her to have an abortion and controlled many aspects of her life. Although there was no evidence of physical violence or suffering, the Supreme Court accepted her claims. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Julia Niswinder. Julia Niswinder was born in 1989 in the small town of Monroe, which has a population of 20,000. She has a twin sister named Jennifer. The girls were raised by their grandparents while their mother was building her personal life. Kim had given birth to them at 15, claiming she was raped at 14 by a guy she barely knew. However, relatives say he was someone familiar and close to the family. Regardless, he avoided taking responsibility. After discovering her pregnancy, Kim decided she wasn't ready to be a mother and entrusted her daughters to her parents. The grandparents became their official guardians and raised them as their own children. When the children grew up, their mother remarried Jim, who worked in the cleaning business, and they had another daughter. By then, Jennifer was already attending school and living with her mother. While Julia spent a lot of time with her grandparents on her mother's side. In high school, things changed. According to her mother, Julia became defiant and uncontrollable, often arguing with her twin sister, Jennifer. Eventually, their mother grew tired of the constant fights between the daughters. Their house was small, with only 2 bedrooms and a living room, so she couldn't give the older daughters separate rooms. As a result, she decided to send Julia to live with her grandparents again. Julia was happy to return to grandparents. She lived there for a while, and her grandparents indulged her and were very affectionate toward her. At that time, Julia became very concerned about her appearance and tried to lose weight. She followed strict diets, restricted herself in almost everything, and ate very little. Her grandma was worried about her, but Julia assured her that she was fine. At 19 years old, Julia needed to make her own life decisions. She enrolled at Eastern Michigan University in the journalism faculty and continued living with her grandmother. Julia dreamed of becoming a TV presenter. She became close to Jennifer and her mother but did not want to return home. The two sisters became closer, sharing secrets, experiences, and events in their lives. Julia later moved to a room on the campus of a university in the small town of Salanta, Michigan. She was fortunate to get a room with a bathroom. Julia also got a job with her mother at Walmart. Her new place was a 45-minute drive from her mother's house. Her neighbors were girls she got along with well. On Thursday, December 6, 2012, with Christmas and the holidays approaching, Julia's neighbors left for the weekend to visit their families. Julia visited her mother's family. They had already set up a Christmas tree and began decorating it and the house together. They all enjoyed hot chocolate and listened to Christmas songs, creating a festive atmosphere and having a wonderful time together. On Friday, December 7th, she visited her mother's workplace and they went shopping for presents together. Julia and her mother then went home together, and an argument broke out that turned into a fight. The exact details of the incident remain unclear. Julia left the house in distress, drove to her grandmother's house, and expressed that she never wanted to return to that house again. Her grandmother comforted her, invited her to stay, and together they decorated the Christmas tree and the house. Julia's mother later visited her grandparents and reassured Julia that she had misunderstood the situation. Julia's grandmother listened to both sides and sensed that something was wrong. When her mother left, Julia stayed with her grandmother. The next day, December 8th, Julia went to work. She saw her mother there but did not speak to her. As they passed each other, Julia's mother told her that she loved her. After her shift, Julia went home. During her lunch break, she met her sister Jennifer at a coffee shop and mentioned her plans for the evening, saying that she was going to meet a guy after work. But she kept the details a secret. Julia was very private about her personal life, so it was not surprising that Julia kept the information secret with Jennifer. After meeting with Jennifer, she rushed to the car without putting on her coat, despite the cold weather. The last time Jennifer spoke to Julia was around 11 p.m. when Julia returned home from her date. Their conversation was brief. Julia simply said, "I'm home," before hanging up. Julia was very tired and she needed to study for an exam the next day, December 9th. After working at Walmart, she went shopping and then returned home. That night, she ran into a neighbor returned from visiting her family. The neighbor was getting ready to sleep at her boyfriend's house. Julia closed the bedroom door and was about to go to sleep. While the neighbor was getting ready, she heard the TV playing loudly in Julia's room. This made her feel strange because she had never seen Julia watching TV before, especially when it was time to go to bed. However, the neighbor was in a hurry to meet her boyfriend, so she didn't investigate further and left the house. On Monday morning, December 10th, 2012, a neighbor returned from a family visit. She quickly showered to go to school. While getting ready, she noticed that Julia's alarm clock kept ringing, but no one seemed to have turned it off. Knowing that Julia often struggled to wake up in the morning, the neighbor was not surprised. She knocked on Julia's door to try to wake her up, but received no response. After a while, she decided not to bother her anymore and went to school. That day, Julia did not go to class and also missed an important exam, which was unusual for her, as she had never been absent or late for an exam before. Julia missed her shift at her stepfather's cleaning company, where she had taken a part-time job to earn money before the holidays. Although she was scheduled to work, she did not show up. She also missed her shift at Walmart that evening, which raised concerns among her coworkers. The next day, December 11th, Julia missed her shift for the second time. Her coworkers grew increasingly concerned and tried to reach her by phone, but no one answered. An employee had Julia's mother's phone number and called her that evening to inform her that Julia had missed 2 shifts. Julia's mother, Kim, was at a cafe playing darts with Jennifer and other relatives at the time. She noted that their schedules often didn't align, and it was common for them to go 2 or 3 days without seeing or calling each other. When Kim learned that Julia was missing and not responding to calls, she panicked and tried to reach her daughter repeatedly, but all her calls went to voicemail. Concerned, Kim called Julia's friend Rachel and asked her to check on Julia. Rachel agreed and went to Julia's house around 9 p.m. Rachel found Julia's car parked in the driveway next to the house, but no one answered the door or the phone. Concerned, Rachel sought out a security guard for assistance. She asked the guard to open Julia's room to check, but he refused and instead called the police. The guard could not find a spare key to Julia's room. When the police arrived, they broke down the door and entered the apartment. Inside the bedroom, everything was in disarray, furniture was scattered on the floor. And Julia's handbag was on the bed, making it look like a robbery had taken place. As the police continued their search of the apartment, they made a dreadful discovery. They found the body of the Julia face down in the bathtub. Her body was fully submerged, and her hands were behind her back with her feet together. There were signs of restraint on her wrists and ankles. A phone was also found underwater beneath her body. Julia's torn clothes were on the bathroom floor, and it was evident that the fabric had been cut with a knife. After examining her, the police concluded that her body had likely been in the water for 2 days and was in a state of advanced decomposition. The knife and rope used to tie up Julia were not found anywhere in the apartment. All of Julia's valuables, including her wallet with cash, laptop, and car keys, were still on the table, and the wrapped Christmas presents were untouched. The only items missing were the pillowcase and the keys to Julia's room, which led investigators to rule out the possibility of a robbery. Rachel learned the tragic news from the police and immediately informed Julia's mother about her daughter's death. Kim and Jennifer quickly got into their car and drove to Julia's apartment. Despite the police cordon, the mother and sister approached the building to find out what had happened. They tried to enter the room but were stopped by the police. The family demanded answers about Julia, but no one would give them any information. They were distraught and pressed the police for information, but the police only confirmed that Julia was dead. Police took Julia's family to the station along with her neighbors for questioning. Julia's neighbors said they generally got along with her, although they had had a conflict in the past. They had resolved their differences and had not had any problems since. The neighbors said they were not home when the murder occurred and provided a confirmed alibi, clearing them of any suspicion. Forensic experts examined the crime scene and found no signs of forced entry. All windows and doors were locked. Julia's room was on the first floor, leading police to speculate that she may have opened the door herself and that the attacker was likely someone she knew. At the crime scene, police discovered bloody rubber gloves, male biological fluids, and 3 DNA samples on the gloves. The evidence was analyzed, revealing that 1 DNA sample belonged to Julia, while the other 2 came from an unidentified male. One of the samples was too decomposed to be identifiable, and there was no record of the second male DNA sample in the police database. Notably, the biological fluids belonged to a man who had had a vasectomy, suggesting that he was not a father. This led police to conclude that the suspect was likely an older man rather than a younger one, as vasectomies are not typically performed at a young age. As a result, police focused their search on adult men who knew Julia. An autopsy revealed that Julia died from strangulation. She had been strangled before being thrown into the water. The potential suspect had turned up the volume on the television on the day of the crime to drown out any screams she may have made during the struggle. A toxicology report confirmed that there were no traces of alcohol or illegal drugs in her system. While the police continued their investigation, Julia's family decided to conduct their own investigation to find out the truth. They posted leaflets and appealed to the public for help through the media and social networks. But these efforts did not help their investigation. Police discovered that the girl had been dating a young man shortly before the murder. Police checked Julia's phone and identified the man, taking him in for questioning. However, he was soon released, as he had a solid alibi that cleared him of suspicion. Police found Julia's stepfather, Jim, suspicious, as he appeared unusually calm and did not seem to be grieving over Julia's death. He was familiar with her house and could have easily gained access to the apartment, as Julia may have let him in herself. People who knew him described him as strange, reclusive, and unsociable. Everyone kept their distance from Jim, especially after Jim had a vasectomy following the birth of his daughter with Kim. This made him the primary suspect in the investigation. When Julia's mother, Kim, and her sister Jennifer found out about the suspicions surrounding Jim, they strongly defended him, believing he was innocent. Kim argued that she had trouble sleeping at night and frequently got up to use the bathroom due to health issues. She insisted that she would have noticed if Jim had left the bed that night, but he stayed with her the entire time. Kim rejected all allegations against Jim, explaining that she had previously been a victim of violence. She stated that if she had sensed any danger from Jim, she would never have allowed him near her daughters. Julia's grandparents were very concerned about her and decided to speak up. They informed the police about a fight that occurred at Julia's parents' house a few days before the tragedy. Although Julia didn't provide details about the conflict, she did say she would never return to that house. This raised questions about whether she had discovered something troubling or if there was another reason that led Jim to want to eliminate her. The grandparents noted that Kim and Jim's marriage was on the brink of divorce, as they frequently argued, and Kim had expressed that Jim might leave her. They hadn't shared a bedroom for a long time, making it difficult for Kim to know if Jim was home that night. This could explain Kim's intense protectiveness of her husband. She might have been trying to save their marriage or covering for him. In the early days after the incident, the police prevented Julia's mother and stepfather from entering her room where the crime took place, as they were collecting evidence and information. Despite this, Kim and Jim attempted to gain access to the room and were eventually successful, although Kim later said she did not remember how they got in. The police were surprised because they had not been granted permission to enter the room. Once inside, her parents immediately began unpacking and cleaning the room. First, they dumped a large bag of trash in the bathroom. After the cleanup, much of the original crime scene became untraceable. Additionally, Julia's car, which she had saved up to buy and was still paying for, was quickly sold by her parents, on the grounds that they could no longer afford the loan. This raised significant suspicions. The FBI eventually got involved. Forensic experts concluded that Jim was the prime suspect. Julia's maternal grandfather, James, noticed that Jim had a very strict parenting style, often making her cry and cornering her. James suspected that Jim might be punishing his daughter harshly behind closed doors. It was also revealed that Jim had been a karate instructor and the children had reported their mother for his brutal treatment. Jim had trained his daughter rigorously, helping her achieve a black belt in karate. The police asked Jim to provide a DNA sample, which he readily provided to clear his name. However, his DNA did not match that of the second man found on the glove. As time passed, the investigation stalled, and the case seemed to have been forgotten by everyone except the grandparents. They regularly asked the police for any updates and expressed their frustration at the lack of progress. Julia's grandparents still believed that the police should thoroughly investigate Jim, her stepfather. James suspected that Jim may have taken latex gloves from a cleaner at work to frame someone else while concealing his own involvement. However, this theory was never pursued further. It left many unanswered questions, such as whose DNA was on the damaged glove. It raised the possibility that there could have been two criminals involved. They asked Jim to take a lie detector test, which he passed twice, but Julia's grandfather remained skeptical. He still believed that Jim was somehow involved in Julia's murder. James' persistent attempts to communicate with the police about the investigation led them to stop contacting him. This decision upset only Julia's mother. Living in Florida, James was unable to visit the police in person, which resulted in him losing access to important information and feeling powerless. His daughter Kim and granddaughters, Jennifer and Madison, wrote to James to say he was no longer part of their family, which hurt him deeply. One of Julia's friends informed the police that Julia had reported harassment from her stepfather, who referred to Julia as his girlfriend, causing her fear. This suggested a possible sexual motive for the murder, prompting the police to seek a search warrant for Jim's home. During the search of his laptop, they discovered numerous explicit photos of minors. Jim was arrested due to these photos. At first, he claimed he was innocent, insisting that he did not know where the photos came from and that he was being framed. Later, he conceded that the photos might belong to him but insisted he was unaware that the subjects were minors. He maintained his innocence and was found not guilty because the prosecution failed to prove that the photos showed minors. Later, Julia's friend withdrew her accusations against her stepfather, although police informed her that her previous statements had been recorded. James discovered that Kim and Jennifer spoke to this friend and likely pressured her to change her testimony. Despite everything, Kim continues to support her husband and believes in his innocence. She thinks that her neighbor is responsible for her daughter's death due to a disagreement. However, this theory is not taken seriously because the neighbor has an alibi, and only male DNA was found at the crime scene. 3 years after Julia's murder, in 2015, Kim and Jim's attorney advised them not to give a written statement because it could be used against them in court. James was even more angry when he heard this. He felt that if they had nothing to hide, they would not have hired an attorney or refused to give a written statement, because giving false testimony could have legal consequences. By insisting on giving a statement, they avoided potential liability. It was later discovered that the police had overlooked a crucial piece of evidence. It was the bathtub rug that might contain the criminal's DNA. This information emerged when new police took over the case. They reviewed all the documents and paid special attention to this rug. However, the police could not find it. Julia's mother allowed them to search among Julia's belongings, which she had taken from Julia's room and stored in a storage room, but the rug was not among them. Its disappearance is a mystery. Only Julia's family had access to the storage facility. Julia's grandfather suspected that her mother and stepfather had thrown the rug away while cleaning the bathroom, along with the trash. The stepfather's mother and Julia's twin sister both insist that there was no argument in their home a few days before Julia's murder. They described the gathering as warm and friendly, with no disagreements. The James is determined to seek justice for Julia. He has thoroughly researched DNA and discovered that technology has made significant advancements in the past decade, allowing for the analysis of damaged or weak DNA samples. He is puzzled by the police's disregard for his requests and suggestions, as they appear reluctant to pursue the case. Julia's mother, Kim, has divorced Jim, but they remain on good terms and maintain communication. She continues to support Jim's innocence and views him as the decent person. As a result, there have been no arrests in the case, and the perpetrator remains unpunished.